Chapter 196. Yes, Brother Xining is right. But this matter still requires Big Brother Yeshen's decision. I think it's better to enter the capital first. The competition king chuckled. On the surface, he seemed to believe Xining's suggestion, but in reality, he was short-sighted and had limited knowledge. It would be difficult for him to achieve anything great. Seeing this clearly, Xining simply didn't say anything more. Once the capital was truly conquered, leader Yes Hen would probably arrive soon. At that time, it wouldn't be too late to make a suggestion. At this time, both Sagan Wang and Xining treated the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty as their own backyard. In their view, wherever the army arrived, the enemy would definitely surrender. But they did not know that Yang Chendong had been waiting for them for a long time. Another day, the sun slowly rose from the east. With the arrival of a new day, the capital was extremely quiet. Because of the fear of war, those who could leave had basically left. Those who stayed behind were those who didn't want to leave for various reasons. In Yang Chendong's words, those who stayed behind had a stable mentality. Even if the war started, they wouldn't easily cause trouble. With no one causing trouble in the capital, Yang Chendong had less to worry about, and he could focus on fighting the Tile army. Although he had the Xianxia's new army and the world's most advanced firearms, he still had too few people. Including the 100 cold vanguards led by Xiao Feng, they only had 400 people. Facing an enemy dozens of times their number, they couldn't be careless. War had always been a very serious matter, and it was also the easiest thing to change. A careless mistake, or a problem in a link could directly change the outcome. Of course, Yang Chendong was still very confident in the Xianxia's new army's cold vanguards. They were forbidden from doing anything, so there wouldn't be any problems. What he was worried about was the 10,000 city defense army that the emperor had given him, including the 5,500 soldiers from the warden's office. These people were used to running amok in the city. Bullying ordinary people was not a problem, but when faced with the elite Walla cavalry, it was hard to say what the result would be. Even when they were fighting in a favorable battle, it was doubtful whether they could achieve complete victory. Thus, early in the morning, Yang Chendong had called over the 5 commanders and led them to the north gate of the capital, the Dusheng Gate, to stand on the gate tower. Along with the 5 commanders, there was a general called Yang Guang. He was originally the deputy commander. When Shi Hang, the commander, lost the battle and disappeared, he naturally became extremely important. Yang Guang was quite capable. More importantly, he had a good attitude. When he saw Yang Chendong, he would call him Marquis, then Marquis. He felt very close. Under his lead, Sun Tong and the other commanders also changed from calling him Yang Ho to Marquis. Standing in front of Yang Guang, Sun Tong and the other 5 commanders, Yang Chendong pointed behind him, which was the empty space outside Dusheng Gate. Before long, the Walla cavalry will appear here. A big battle is unavoidable. Everyone, are you afraid? Yang Chendong's tone was very calm, even cold. It was as if the appearance of the enemy was like a story, unable to stir up any waves in his heart. In comparison, the 6 commanders' expressions were not as good. Yang Guang and Sun Tong were still in a better state. At least they could still stand up straight. Tao Jin, Yang Jie, Gao Li, and Mao Fushou, the 4 commanders' faces were obviously much uglier. If one looked carefully, their legs were trembling. In this month, the morning in the capital was not hot, but it was far from cold. However, the 4 of them were so nervous that they broke out in cold sweat. This was enough to show the fear in their hearts. Forget it, the 4 of you will follow what we said before. Each of you will lead 200 soldiers to maintain order in the city. But remember, before the enemy enters the city, there cannot be chaos in the capital. Otherwise, if there is a problem, the person who will be punished will be punished. Yang Chendong did not want Tao Jin and the other 3 to stay. Their presence was not only a good thing for the morale of the soldiers, it could also lead the other soldiers astray and make them feel afraid. Hearing that they did not have to face the Walla cavalry, Tao Jin and the other 3 heaved a sigh of relief. They clasped their fists and bowed to Yang Chendong before retreating from the tower. Only Yang Guang and Sun Tong were left. Yang Chendong said, "Vice Commander Yang, you are in charge of leading 5,000 cavalry to remain under the Dusheng Gate. When the time comes when I give the order, lead the army out of the city in pursuit. Remember, without Marquis' order, you are not to attack. Also, when you leave the city, Do not go too far. 10 li is the limit. If you exceed this distance, immediately retreat. Do you understand? Yang Guang, who was called out, was confused. From Yang Chendong's words, he was leading the cavalry out to chase after the enemy. Did he not need to fight a battle? If he did not fight, how could he be sure that the enemy would escape? If they did not escape, how could they chase after them? But while he was confused, military orders were like mountains. Yang Chendong was the commanding general personally appointed by Zhu Qiyu. Since there was a military order, he only needed to follow it. Yes, please rest assured, Marquis. I will definitely act according to your orders. After saying this, Yang Guang clasped his fists and left to make preparations. 5,000 strong horses. This was a number that had been gathered after searching the city for a long time. It was also one of the strongest forces in the capital that everyone could see. Yang Guang also left, leaving behind Sun Tong, the commanding general, standing there with his chest puffed out and his head raised. He also had an imposing aura. In history, Sun Tong had chosen to rely on Jining. He had a glorious time, but in the end, his ending was very tragic. After understanding this part of history from the book, Yang Chendong realized that this person still had some ability. As long as he was guided well, he would become a good general. Thus, he intended to train him and keep him by his side. Commander Sun, I'll leave the remaining 4,000 people in the warden's office to you. They are all placed above the Dushing Gate. You have to give people the impression that there are soldiers everywhere. Can you do it? Facing Sun Tong, Yang Chendong gave him his task. Please rest assured, Marquis. I will definitely do a good job, Sun Tong replied in a loud voice, but in reality, he was already very confused. What did the loyal Marquis mean? Was he only leading soldiers to guard the city gates? Did he not need to send people to meet the enemy outside the city? It seemed that he was going to passively defend the city, but he didn't know if he would be able to do so. Sun Tong went to make arrangements, his mind filled with confusion. Just as he was wondering if he would have to rely on the city gate towers to stop Walla's army, a new order came down that left him completely confused. He didn't understand what Yang Chendong wanted to do. The new mission was to close all the gates of the capital except for the Dushing Gate. The only one that wasn't closed, the Dushing Gate, had to be left wide open so that people could walk straight in. He didn't understand why the gates had to be opened. Wouldn't this be allowing Walla's army to enter? It had to be known that cavalry was most proficient in land attacks. If they defended the city gates, they might have a chance of winning. But if they opened the gates and let the people in, wouldn't that mean that they were giving up their advantage? This would only increase the difficulty of defending the city. Sun Tong, who couldn't understand, arranged for people to follow Yang Chendong's orders while ordering his trusted aide to inform eunuch Jining in the palace. The wheels of history were so similar. In his previous life, he had relied on Jining, and in this life, he was going to follow the same trend. In the palace, all the officials were summoned to the court. Compared to the usual court meetings, all the officials had lost the mood to submit memorials today. Zhu Qiyu sat on the dragon throne, but no matter how big the dragon throne was, it didn't seem to be able to calm him down. As if he was on pins and needles, he would move his butt from time to time, vividly displaying his anxiety. In reality, he couldn't help but worry. If the capital fell, it would be the end of his reign as emperor. He would become the second emperor after Zhu Qiyu to be defeated by Walla, becoming a disgrace in the history of the great Ming dynasty. Whether he would become a lofty emperor, a prisoner, or even a dead man all depended on how this battle to defend the capital was fought. Unlike in history, Yu Qian, the assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel, was no longer present. Under Yang Chendong's guidance, they did not engage in battle with Walla's army on the outskirts. After Shi Heng's defeat, all the pressure was focused on the Victory Gate. That place would decide the final outcome of this battle. Reporting. Just as Zhu Qiyu's face was still filled with apprehension, the soldier sent by Sun Pao arrived outside the throne room. Enter the hall. Jining, who was standing next to Zhu Qiyu, was also concerned about the outcome of this battle. This time, he didn't wait for the emperor to agree before shouting out orders. At this moment of life and death, no one was thinking about whether Jining had overstepped her authority. Everyone was thinking about whether there would be a result in front of them. Was it a victory? Or had they lost? The soldier was allowed to enter, So he lowered his head and walked into the hall. Soon after, he dropped to his knees and loudly reported, "Marquis of Loyalty has ordered the Victory Gate to be opened. Deputy Commander Yang Guang has led 5,000 cavalry to lie in wait within the city. Commander Sun Tong has led 4,000 some soldiers to guard the gate tower of the Victory Gate." What? As the soldier finished explaining the situation at the gate, the Imperial court instantly grew rowdy. How could they possibly open the gate? The Walla cavalry are most skilled in charging formations. The tall walls are our only support. Abandoning the gate tower to defend is simply avoiding our advantage. Minister of War Yi Ming loudly proclaimed in order to show off his erudition. That's right, that's right. Marquis of Loyalty's actions are truly inappropriate, the other officials began to jeer. Enough. The Minister of Rights, Hu Cheng, was so angry that his lips trembled as he roared when he saw that the Imperial court had turned into a pot of porridge. They were actually acting like commoners on the street. Chapter 197. With this roar, all the officials focused their gazes on him. You are all important officials of the court, yet you are throwing yourselves into chaos like commoners. Where is your decency? Hu Shao raised his beard and loudly questioned the officials. In terms of age and experience, Hu Kuang had sufficient qualifications. With this shout, many of the officials lowered their heads, not daring to argue with him. But there were also those who did not fear Hu Shao, such as the Minister of War, Yi Ming, who stepped forward with his ceremonial tablet. Minister Hu, could it be that just because Yang Chendong is your grandson-in-law, you are protecting him like this? The Minister of Works, Shi Pu, also stepped forward and said, Minister Hu, now is not the time to be thinking about family ties. That's right. When the country is in danger, we should consider the big picture and put family ties aside. The new Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, also stepped forward and criticized Hu Shao. After attending court for so many years, Hu Shao had rarely been attacked by 3 ministers at once. But in the face of this situation, he had no intention of backing down. Instead, he looked at the 3 of them and said with disdain, "Oh, so the 3 of you should know how to fight, right? If that's the case, why didn't you step forward to shoulder the heavy burden when His Majesty was selecting great generals?" The Minister of War, Yi Ming, blushed at Hu Zhao's words. He knew that he was the one who should step forward to shoulder the burden, but he did not have the confidence to do so. Now that Hu Shao had said this, he was clearly attacking him. Minister Hu, we are talking about the matter of the Victory Gate opening without attacking. Please don't change the topic, okay? Could it be that Yang Chendong has already surrendered to the Walla, and as his grandfather, you will also benefit from it? Is that why you are speaking up for him? Yi Ming's attack touched on what everyone was most worried about. For a moment, the expressions of many officials changed. Even Zhu Qiyu, who sat on the dragon throne, turned ghastly pale. If what Minister Yi Ming said was true, then wasn't he handing the capital over to the enemy? Minister Yi, please conduct yourself with dignity. Seeing that the emperor and all the ministers were moved by Yi Ming's words, Hu Shao roared with a face full of anger. Does Minister Yi have any evidence for what he said? Evidence? Of course not, but why is the city gate open? Yi Ming couldn't help but gloat when he saw Hu Shao getting angry. Originally, he wasn't even a 3rd-rank official, but because of Zhu Qiyu's appreciation, he was given the position of Minister of War and became a 2nd-rank official of the Great Ming dynasty. But even so, he knew that some of the more experienced old officials still didn't like him. Now, he could say that Minister Hu was speechless. In the future, no one would dare to look down on him in court. Hu Shao was an old official of several dynasties and had seen many storms. How could he be stumped by a new noble, Yi Ming? Hearing that the other party had no evidence, he couldn't help but sneer and ask, since there is no evidence, Yi Daren's words just now are suspected of framing. The contempt in Hu Zhao's eyes was very obvious when he didn't even call him minister and changed to lord. Yi Ming's face immediately turned ugly when he heard Hu Zhao's words. But before he could think of a counterattack, Hu Shao continued, during this period of time, who doesn't know that the loyal Marquis has bought a lot of property in the capital? Let me ask you, if he didn't have absolute confidence in defending the capital, why would he do this? This might be because he wants to calm the people. Besides, if he has already colluded with Walla, I believe that when the foreign race enters the capital, they won't touch his property, right? Ming didn't know how to answer the question, so he simply gauged the heart of a gentleman with the yardstick of a petty person. Haha, what a joke. This is simply your excessive conjecture. Presumably, the emperor and the officials already knew what kind of person Walla was. He was simply a group of insatiable people. Just think about it, how could they put away their greed for the sake of others when dealing with such a person? If the loyal Marquis wants to be on good terms with Walla, he doesn't need to do this at all. Everyone, don't forget who saved Ingzong from Walla. If he wants to be on good terms with Walla, he doesn't need to do this at all. When Ingzong's name was mentioned, the ministers immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. Yes, if Yang Chendong was really such a traitor, he didn't need to do that at all. This reason instantly convinced many people, including acting sect master Zhu Qiyu. The loyal Marquis saved Ingzong's life, but he didn't go to Nanjing a while ago? I believe everyone can already understand his intentions. This time, he's withstanding a huge amount of pressure to fight against a strong enemy. If we still don't trust him, wouldn't it be too disappointing? Hu Chong spoke as if he was fighting for justice for Yang Chendong. In fact, he was also very optimistic about his grandson-in-law. With Hu Zhao's words, the originally excited ministers quickly calmed down. Even Emperor Zhu Qiyu was a lot more confident because of these words. He said in the court, "Yes, the loyal Marquis is loyal to the great Ming. No one is allowed to say such words in the future. Now let us wait for the good news." Because of Hu Zhao's argument, the debate in the court was finally suppressed. Yang Chendong, who was still unaware of this, was standing on the tower of the Victory Gate at this moment, looking into the distance. He didn't know that Hu Zhao had helped him block the attacks of the ministers, so he could lead the army in the front line at ease. Of course, even without Hu Zhao's help, Yang Chendong wouldn't hand over his military power at this time. It would just cause a lot of trouble. Standing on the tower, the moment he put down the binoculars, he said with a smile to the 4 delicate women in camouflage clothing standing beside him, "You can see now, the Walla cavalry is here." "Ah, are they here? Where are they? Where are they?" Hu Zhao and the other women were very excited at this moment. They each held the binoculars hanging around their necks and looked into the distance. Sure enough, there was a burst of smoke and dust, and the Walla cavalry was here. With the competition king as the leader and Xining as the guide, the 10,000 Walla cavalry were rapidly heading toward the capital of the Great Ming dynasty. With so many people, looking from a distance, it was really a spectacular sight. Seeing that they were less than 15 li away from the capital, the fast horse scouts in the front line rushed back and reported that the Victory Gate in the capital was wide open. The gate is wide open? What does this mean? The competition king was somewhat at a loss when he heard this news. Logically speaking, if the Great Ming army knew that he was coming, they would either defend the city to the death or flee like crazy. Why did they open the gate? This was inconsistent with the facts. Xining was also confused by this news. He had not been in the capital for so long, so he did not know what had happened here. All he knew was that the Great Ming dynasty had a situation where 2 emperors ruled together because of Zhu Qiyu's ascension. That was all. In Xining's opinion, having 2 emperors ruling together was a good thing. When the power was divided, it gave the Walla army a chance to break through. But now that the gate of the capital was wide open, he could not figure it out. Before he could figure out what was going on, the competition king had already asked him, "Brother Xining, why did the Great Ming dynasty open the Victory Gate? Could it be that they want to surrender to us?" "This. Maybe." Xining did not know the reason, so he naturally did not dare to talk nonsense. He could only follow the competition king's words. Xining was just being polite. To put it bluntly, he did not have any ideas. But when the competition king heard his answer, he thought that he had guessed correctly. He was overjoyed and said, "Haha, as expected. The Great Ming dynasty's army is just a scoundrel. When they know that our elite cavalry is coming, they must be panicking. In order to save their lives, it is possible that they will take the initiative to surrender. In this case, order the army to speed up and try to enter the capital for lunch at noon." Hearing the order, the Walla cavalry was overjoyed and eager to go, but only Xining felt that things were not so simple. However, he really could not think of a reason to do so he could only follow the army to the Victory Gate. "They are coming straight to us." On the city gate tower, Hu Yen jumped and said. Then she realized that her performance was a little rude, so she immediately walked to Yang Chendong's side with a red face. Ha! Seeing Hu Yen showing such a cute side, Yang Chendong laughed. He was more proud that the Walla army was coming to the victory gate according to his plan, which was what made him happy. There were only 10,000 city defense soldiers, and they were only a second-line army. Yang Chendong did not dare to have too much hope for them. But the capital of the great Ming dynasty was really too big. There were as many as 12 gates that could enter the city. How to concentrate the troops and lure the enemy to attack was the first thing to consider. In order to achieve this goal, Yang Chendong ordered the other 11 gates to be closed, and only the victory gate was opened. Now, it seemed that he had successfully attracted the enemy's troops. It was only a distance of 15 li. In just a few moments, Vala's mighty cavalry appeared outside the victory gate. It was truly an army of more than 10,000 soldiers. Coupled with the fact that they were cavalry, it gave people a sense of grandeur. This kind of battle formation also scared Hu Yen and the other girls. Everything they knew about war was just from hearing about it. They had never seen it like this. For a moment, their bodies trembled because of nervousness. Yang Chendong had already noticed their changes. He walked forward and gave them a big hug. The warm hug quickly calmed them down. Then, the 6th young master Yang strode to the front of the city wall. He looked down and saw Xi Ning and the others coming out of the cavalry. Chapter 198. It was originally Xi Ning's idea to take the initiative to come out. In his eyes, the great Ming dynasty was already finished. They would only have a bright future if they followed Walla. What he needed to do now was to perform well before everything was set in stone and gain more capital so that he could gain more benefits in the future. That was what he needed to do now. Therefore, when the army was 300 steps away from the gate, he took the initiative to ask to be the vanguard and talk to the great Ming Empire's garrison to see if they could enter the city without shedding any blood. For Xi Ning's request, the king of competition naturally agreed. When the two armies met, there was already danger. If someone wanted to take the initiative to volunteer, how could he not agree? Therefore, Xi Ning came to the victory gate with 2 Walla cavalry soldiers who were protecting him. Xi Ning, who was riding his horse, looked arrogant, but in fact, he was very careful. This could be seen from the fact that he stopped when he was 180 steps away from the gate. He still cherished his life. At that time, the most advanced long-range weapons were firearms and strong bows. However, the effective range of a strong bow was generally about 160 steps. It would lose its original power if it was further away. As for firearms, although they could shoot that far away, they would definitely lose their accuracy. It could be said that 180 steps was a safe distance. Which general is on the gate tower? Can you come out and meet me? I am the vanguard of the Walla army, Xi Ning. As soon as he arrived at the victory gate, Xi Ning's unpleasant voice, which sounded like a male duck's throat, rushed straight to the top of the gate tower. Yang Chengwang was still dressed in cyan. After Xi Ning shouted, Yang Chengwang walked to the gate tower unhurriedly and exposed his body completely. He looked down at Xi Ning and cupped his fists. It turns out to be eunuch Xi. I've been waiting here for a long time. The one who came out was actually Yang Chendong. Xi Ning narrowed his eyes and looked up. Suddenly, a burst of anger rose from the bottom of his heart. His younger brother, Xi Shang, once had a conflict with Yang Chendong. Not long after that, his younger brother died while performing a mission. Although the report at that time said that his younger brother died because of excessive indulgence in sex with a prostitute called Sai Tianxian, he was unwilling to believe this fact. Xi Shang could be said to be a veteran in the field of flowers. How could he make such a low-level mistake? His instincts told him that there was something fishy about this matter, and it was very likely that he had been harmed by his enemies. However, because her younger brother and she had offended too many people, it was not easy to find a target. However, he still secretly investigated. Before the results were out, Ingzong, Zhu Qizhen, had already sent him to the battlefield, which led to the current situation. Back then, Yang Chendong was one of the people he suspected. Now that he suddenly saw this person reveal himself, how could he remain calm? At that moment, he coldly snorted and said, I really can't believe it. Is there no one else in the great Ming dynasty? How could they let a brat greet the Walla's army? Xi Ning's words clearly implied something, and also expressed her strong dissatisfaction with Yang Chendong. He said that the sixth young Master Yang was too young to take on such a big responsibility. As soon as these words came out, Tiger's Mane and the others, as well as Hu Yen and the other girls, were immediately dissatisfied. As the person involved, Yang Qindong was not angry at this time. On the contrary, he said with a smile, "Duke Shi, you flatter me. As the saying goes, the kind of person you are dealing with depends on the kind of person you are dealing with. Just like the Walla who doesn't know what's good for him and doesn't know how to repay kindness, the great Ming dynasty can send the young Marquis to deal with him." Hu Yen and the other women covered their mouths and chuckled at his counterattack. First, Xi Ning looked down on Yang Qindong, and then she was ridiculed. It was because the Walla was weak that the great Ming dynasty sent the young Marquis of Loyalty to greet him. The meaning was that the great Ming dynasty would send the kind of person you are. This is called equality. If you look down on Yang Qindong, then you are actually looking down on yourself. This was clearly Yang Qindong giving her a taste of her own medicine. Hu Yen and the other girls, who had long known that Lu Lang's words were powerful, how could they not feel sad for Xi Ning at this moment? There were not many people in the world who could win against their husband in a war of words. On the city tower, Yang Qindong's words of sarcasm and even abuse made Xi Ning's face turn red and her eyes widen. But before she could make any counterattack, Yang Qindong continued, "Your body, hair, and skin are from your parents. You don't dare to destroy the beginning of filial piety. If you castrate yourself, how will you have the face to see your parents and relatives when you go to the underworld? This is unfilial. Loyal to the country, you have received the kindness of the great Ming dynasty. You should be a person of the great Ming dynasty. Even if you die, you will be a ghost of the great Ming dynasty. However, in order to survive, you ran to the enemy. This is a cruel and unscrupulous act. This is disloyal. You bully the common people and are greedy. Your parents and family were once common people. Once you gained power, you bullied the weak. This is unbenevolent. For your own selfishness, you actually danced with the wolves and wanted to lead the war to the great Ming dynasty, making the common people homeless and living in misery. This is unrighteous. You are disloyal, unfilial, heartless, and unrighteous people. I don't know how you have the face to live in this world." After a series of hearty and incessant curses, Xi Ning's face became more and more unsightly. She felt as if the blood in her body seemed to be churning endlessly, and in the next moment, she would spit it out. Xi Ning's performance was seen by Yang Qindong, but he did not have the slightest intention of stopping. Instead, he raised his voice by a few decibels and continued to shout, "You are a thief. Heaven and earth are witnesses. You are the leader of the thieves." After shouting, Yang Qindong suddenly pointed at Xi Ning with his right hand and said, "If the heavens have eyes, this child should die immediately. He can no longer cause trouble in the world." Puh! A bullet flew out, following Yang Qindong's finger, and landed right where Xi Ning's heart was. Xi Ning, who was originally angry, only felt a pain in his chest, and then he lost all feeling. With a plop, he fell from the horse to the ground. Everything happened too fast. When the sniper rifle with a silencer was fired, coupled with Yang Qindong's shout, it did not attract the slightest bit of attention from others. What everyone saw was the scene of Xi Ning falling from the horse and hitting the ground after Yang Qindong asked the heavens. Xi Ning was dead. His body was lying on the ground. It gave people the feeling that even if he died, he could not wash away the sins he had committed. Therefore he could not face others. Jia! The two Walla cavalry soldiers who were originally standing beside Xi Ning saw that the person they were protecting was actually cursed to death. They were shocked and immediately turned their horses back. "You are aiding the evildoer. How can the heavens forgive you so easily? Let's die together." Seeing that the fat sheep in his hands was about to escape, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with a sneer. Then, he pointed at the two Walla cavalry soldiers who were rushing back. Immediately, the two figures fell from the horse and rolled on the ground twice. After that, there was no sign of life. With 3 finger strikes, 3 people died in succession. This shocking scene shocked everyone. At this time, whether it was the great Ming soldiers on the city tower or the Walla cavalry soldiers below the city, they all looked up at the sky. They seemed to be looking for the place where the gods were. The gods have shown themselves. After the Walla cavalry 3 steps away from the city wall couldn't find the reason, there was a commotion. Many of the cavalry had already reached out and tightened the ropes of their horses. It seemed that they would retreat at any time. "Don't panic. Don't panic. The leader of the cavalry was also surprised, but as the vanguard general, he couldn't retreat like this. Otherwise, not only would he be punished by the military law, he was afraid that he would be ridiculed by the other generals when he returned. Under the loud roar, the Walla cavalry gradually calmed down. In order to stabilize the morale of the troops, the leader stretched out his waist and pulled out the scimitar. It seemed that he was ready to attack. What? Don't you know how to retreat? If that's the case, then stay here. Yang Chendong, who was standing on the city tower, narrowed his eyes. He couldn't let the Walla cavalry charge. Otherwise, it was inevitable that there would be casualties in the chaos. He had to fight this battle beautifully. He couldn't afford any losses. Therefore, when he saw that the leader was about to pull out his scimitar, Yang Chendong pointed his right hand in the air. The leader, who had just raised his scimitar, twisted his body on the horse and fell to his death. Not good, the general fell off his horse. The leader was already shot in the forehead and couldn't be saved. A few of his soldiers wanted to get down from their horses to see what happened. On the city tower, Yang Chendong pointed his finger again. The 5 Walla cavalrymen who had just dismounted fell to the ground one by one and died. Ah! It's really a god. Run! Under the continuous deaths, the Walla cavalry was agitated by the scene in front of them. They were surrounded by a deep sense of fear. It was as if they were afraid that they would be the next one to be pointed at. The cavalrymen in the front row all turned their horses around. The Walla cavalry suddenly became chaotic. With the death of the leader, there was no commanding general and no unified military order. The consequences of this chaos were very serious. Yang Chendong, who was on the victory pavilion, had already predicted this moment. Seeing that the opportunity was here, he decisively said to Sun Tong, "Quick, order General Yang Guang to go out of the city and kill the enemy." Sun Tong was also stunned by Yang Chendong's continuous pointing. At this moment, he also had a feeling that it was a god. He was so shocked that he would do whatever Yang Chendong said. He immediately agreed and went to pass on the order. Yang Guang, who was under the victory pavilion, saw the situation outside clearly through the hole in the city wall. He was so shocked that he forgot to chase after the enemy. It wasn't until Sun Tong ran to his side and loudly said that the loyal marquis had ordered to go out of the city and kill the enemy that he recovered. "All cavalrymen, listen to my order. Go out of the city and kill the enemy. Go out of the city and kill the enemy." Many of the soldiers saw Yang Chendong's godlike appearance and their morale was greatly shaken. One by one, they waved their scimitars and rushed out of the city gate. Chapter 199. The formation of the Walla cavalry was still in disarray. When they saw countless great Ming cavalry rushing out of the city gates, they became even more flustered. Every single one of them turned on their horses and fled. However, their formation was already in a complete mess. How could they just run away like that? Before the great Ming cavalry could even reach them, they had already trampled over many of their own people. By the time the great Ming cavalry arrived, they were like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves. They only cared about covering their heads and fleeing like rats. No one dared to fight against the great Ming cavalry. This was a one-sided battle. With the death of their general and the loss of their morale, the Walla cavalry was completely routed. In this kind of situation, how could they possibly be a match for the great Ming cavalry whose morale was at its peak? For a time, the situation on the battlefield was completely one-sided. Standing on top of the city gates of the Victory Gate, one could see the Walla cavalry being slaughtered. There were even some Walla cavalry soldiers kneeling on the ground and begging to surrender. The facts proved that there was no army that was undefeatable. As long as one used the right method, they could be defeated and surrendered. Yang Guang waved his large blade and led the charge. Just the number of Walla cavalry soldiers killed by him exceeded 7. Under his leadership, the majority of the great Ming cavalry also managed to kill a few. In the end, they were already 15 li away from the city gates. At this moment, Yang Guang suddenly remembered the words of the loyal marquis. He immediately stopped his horse and gave up on the pursuit. Instead, he turned around and began to clean up the battlefield. Hee. With the situation settled, Yang Chendong revealed a hearty smile. He was in a good mood as he waved at Hu Yan and the others. "Come, let's go back to the immortal abode to eat. Let's go. Hu Yan and the others didn't show the slightest bit of fear. After seeing the brave side of their husband, The fear in their hearts had long flown beyond the highest heavens. Marquis Yang, the war isn't over yet. Sun Tong saw that Yang Chendong was about to leave and hurriedly stood in front of him with a pleading expression. Isn't today's war already over? Oh, that's right. You can also bring your subordinates to capture captives now. That's a great contribution. After we clean up the battlefield, we can report to the Emperor. As for Marquis, he is a little tired and should go back and rest. When the main force of the Walla arrives, Marquis will appear. After saying this to Sun Tong, Yang Chendong and the four madams went back to the Victory Gate. Tiger's Mane, Beta Persei, and Chiu V's first guard team protected him as they gradually disappeared from Sun Tong's sight. Seeing Yang Chendong leave in such a carefree manner, Sun Tong felt a little regretful. He regretted that he did not seize the opportunity to associate with the loyal Marquis, and regretted that he sent the information that the city gates were wide open to the Emperor. Since the deed had already been done, he could only think of a way to make up for it in the future. As for now, of course, he had to lead the troops to capture the captives. Just as Yang Chendong had said, this was a great contribution. Normally, they wouldn't even encounter it, so how could they let it go now that they had encountered it? Sun Tong rushed down the tower with more than 4,000 people, and rushed to the front of the Walla cavalry, who were kneeling on the ground. The officers and soldiers of the 5 cities' warden's office, who originally only bullied the civilians, were now standing upright, as if they had changed into another person. After an hour, the battlefield was cleaned up, and the battle report was also summarized. In one battle, more than 2,000 enemies were killed and more than 5,000 were captured. Yang Chendong's debut finally ended with a great victory. Because Sun Tong was focused on snatching military merits, the throne room did not receive the news immediately. Zhu Qiyu and the ministers were together, waiting for the battle report with a nervous expression. From time to time, the ministers would prick up their ears to listen to the movements outside. However, everything was as usual, and they did not hear any sounds of fighting coming from the city. Since there was no movement, it was good news. The Emperor and the officials waited patiently until a eunuch came to report that Deputy Chief Commander Yang Guang and Commander Sun Tong were waiting outside the hall. Zhu Qiyu hurriedly said, "Quickly invite them in." He even used the word, invite. It could be seen that at this moment, Zhu Qiyu was very concerned about the development of the battle, so much so that he did not even care about losing decorum. Yang Guang and Sun Tong, who were wearing heavy armor, strode into the throne room. When they were 20 steps away from the Emperor, they took the initiative to stop. Then they half knelt on the ground and said in unison, "Great victory, we have come to offer the captives." Although it was only 2 people's voices, under full confidence, their voices were extremely loud and clear. This voice was like a giant hammer that struck the hearts of the Emperor and the ministers. Hua! The Emperor and the ministers, who were originally motionless and staring at the 2 people, couldn't help but tense up and then relax. After hearing the 2 people's reports, they were silent for a few seconds, as if they were all digesting this great victory report. How many captives were captured? What was the result of the battle? The Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji, was worthy of being an old minister. His reaction was extremely fast. While the others were still in shock, he had already asked the key question. In this battle, more than 2,000 enemies were killed, more than 5,000 captives were captured, including Walla's Vanguard General, Sai Bian Wang, Vanguard Guan Xining, and others. 10,000 enemies came, but only 2,000 managed to escape. Yang Guang's voice was still loud. More than 5,000 enemy captives are now outside the Imperial Palace. Emperor and the ministers, please go and take a look. Sun Tong was not willing to give up and reported the merit. This was also what the 2 of them had discussed on the way here. Since the battle was fought together, of course, the merit could not be claimed by one person. In any case, the merit was big enough, so it was not a big deal to have one more person share the burden. In this battle, our army did not have any casualties. We killed the enemy like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. This is all because the Emperor is protected by the heavens. This official congratulates the Emperor. This official congratulates the Emperor. When Sun Tong's words of congratulation came out, the ministers reacted at this time. They collectively kneeled on the ground and shouted loudly and excitedly. In the past, such words were said by the civil officials. The military officials only needed to focus on the battle. Usually, Wasn't the reason why they were raised to be used at critical times? As for the merit or not, forget it. Even if they were military officials, it was their responsibility to win the battle. Did you not see Duke Ing Zhongfu's example? When there was a battle, there was limitless glory. When there was no battle, there was all kinds of suspicion and jealousy from the emperor. Even a random eunuch might dare to bully you. In the end, you ended up without a corpse. Sun Tong rushed to say this sentence, not because of a whim, but because he had thought about it along the way. Why was it that when he risked his life and had the merit, only those civil officials who were good at talking would get it? He was not convinced, so he took the initiative. Sure enough, taking the initiative to say congratulations to the emperor, Sun Tong attracted a lot of good feelings from Zhu Qiyu. Good, very good. General Yang and General Sun have worked hard. After defeating the Walla army, you will be rewarded according to your merits. Ha, now everyone, follow me to see the prisoners. Zhu Qiyu, who was originally nervous and clenched his hands until they turned white, could finally put down his high-hanging heart at this moment. At this moment, he was also in a good mood. Laughing loudly, he led the ministers straight to the square outside the Imperial palace. On the square, there was a black mass of Walla cavalry in strange clothes kneeling on the ground. They all had their heads lowered, their faces dispirited. Some of them were even trembling slightly to show that their hearts were not calm at this moment, and were even a little scared. It was no wonder that they were so nervous. Previously, when Yang Qindong stretched out his finger at the victory gate, one by one, the Walla cavalry fell to the ground and died. Even their general, the king, died because of this. That scene shocked them so much that they still felt scared when they thought about it. The Walla, who had no culture, were very superstitious. They agreed very much with the saying that the gods had appeared. Since even the gods wanted to help the great Ming Empire, how could they fight this war? Surrendering and atoning for their sins might be able to exchange for the forgiveness of the gods. More than 5,000 Walla cavalrymen knelt on the ground obediently. Although their hands were tied, with their current mentality, even if they weren't tied up, not many of them would have the guts to resist. When Zhu Qiyu came here with the ministers, he saw this scene in front of him. Looking at the kneeling Walla cavalry, he couldn't see the end of it. The square, which originally looked very wide, was now very crowded. The great Ming Empire's soldiers and the Walla's surrendered soldiers were all over the ground. At this moment, no one doubted Yang Guang and Sun Tong's battle report. They thought that the war should be won, but the result would not be so good. The two generals were exaggerating in order to get military merits. But now it seemed that they were not exaggerating at all. Involuntarily, when the ministers looked at Yang Guang and Sun Tong, their eyes were full of jealousy. People were like this. When in danger, they often thought that it was enough to save their lives, and other worldly possessions could be ignored. But when it was really safe, the thoughts in their hearts would become more and more greedy. This was just a victory, and the Walla's main force had not suffered much damage, but some ministers were thinking about how to get benefits from it. It could be seen that a man who was not content was like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. It was not as simple as saying, "Congratulations, Your Majesty. This is caused by Your Majesty's heavenly power. This is enough to prove that Your Majesty is the true Son of Heaven." Eunuch Jining looked at the seemingly countless captive soldiers in front of him. After his eyes rolled around, he suddenly knelt on the ground and shouted loudly, "Congratulations, Your Majesty. Your Majesty is the true Son of Heaven." Many ministers who were used to flattering also took the opportunity to kneel on the ground and shouted loudly for the emperor's wisdom. The shouts of the ministers made Zhu Qiyu feel like he was floating. At this moment, he really thought that he was the emperor recognized by the heavens, and he was the son of the heavens. Otherwise, why was his imperial brother Zhu Qizhan defeated by Walla, and why was Shi Hang also defeated by Walla, but only he won? Chapter 200. Ha, all of this is due to the assistance of all the officials. Zhu Qiyu happily distributed the credit to the other officials. For a moment, it attracted endless sounds of gratitude from the officials. However, not all of the officials were shouting that the emperor was the true Son of Heaven. For example, the Minister of Rights, Hu Shao, had always maintained a clear mind. As an old official of several dynasties, he was very clear that the emperor was only the head of the dragons. Otherwise, the court would not be able to be unified and clear. As for who would be the head, it all depended on luck and identity. Just like when Zhu Qizhen was the emperor, didn't these officials also shout that the emperor was wise and that the emperor was the true son of heaven? But in reality, after losing the battle, everyone instantly shut their mouths. Now, they began to praise Zhu Qiyu again. It was really unknown how thick the skin of these people was. However, in the court there were some things that had to be done. If you were too independent, you would only be isolated by the other officials. In that case, it would really be difficult to do anything. However, even if they wanted to flatter, shouldn't they do it more gently? Zhu Qiyu had been nervously waiting in the Imperial palace. What did the victory of this battle have to do with him? He was somewhat displeased, or perhaps it was because of the unfairness of his grandson-in-law. When everyone was shouting that the emperor was wise and long live the emperor, Hu Shao suddenly said, "Generals, where is the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage? Why is he not here? Did he leave the city to chase the enemy or was he injured in the battle?" Finally, someone mentioned Yang Chendong. The originally noisy scene instantly quieted down. Hu Zhao's words were like a bright slap to the face, causing many of the officials' faces to turn red. The true hero of this battle should be Yang Chendong, without a doubt. However, so much time had passed, yet no one thought of him. This was truly a bit too much. When these words came out, Zhu Qiyu's face also turned red. He clearly knew that his performance just now was a bit too much. If it wasn't for Yang Chendong, it would have been difficult to achieve such a great victory. After he knew of the great victory, he didn't think of the person with the greatest merit and instead received the congratulations of the officials. This was truly a bit too much. Fortunately, Hu Shao gave a timely reminder. He also asked, "That's right, why is the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage not here? Why don't we see him?" Zhu Qiyu pretended to be anxious for the officials to see. This immediately attracted many of the officials' nods. They all seemed to be praising the emperor's actions towards the meritorious officials, but in reality, only they knew what was going on. Yang Guang and Sun Chendong, the Marquis of Loyalty and Courage. After all, without this person, there wouldn't be today's victory, and they wouldn't have had the chance to be in the limelight. However, it seemed to be a little late for the emperor to ask about it now. No matter how, the emperor of loyalty Zhu Guang. Now that he was asked, the two immediately knelt on the ground and replied, "Your Majesty, the loyal Marquis wasn't injured. He only said he was tired and went back to rest." Tired? Resting? Zhu Qiyu was confused by this answer. He stood there with a face full of suspicion. Yes, he is indeed tired. The truth is like this. Sun Chendong narrated what happened on the battlefield. From Yang Chendong scolding Xi Ning for being unfaithful, unfilial, heartless, and unjust, he pointed out and Xi Ning died. After that, he pointed out that Xi Ning fell off his horse and died, causing the Walla army to lose morale. Everyone listened to Sun Chendong's narration as if they were listening to a heavenly book. For a moment, everyone's faces tightened. They didn't expect the young Marquis to have such ability. While everyone was still digesting Sun Chendong's words, Minister of War Yi Ming spoke first. "Commander Sun, do you know what you just said? The person standing in front of you is the Emperor, the Son of Heaven. How can you speak without thinking? This subject is not speaking nonsense. What I said is the truth. If you don't believe me, you can ask Commander Yang and all the soldiers who participated in the battle." Sun Chendong heard Yi Ming accuse him of lying and immediately defended himself. A small commander, who was only a 6th grade official, dared to contradict a 2nd grade minister of war. This naturally made Yi Ming's face turn ugly. He secretly made a note of this person and thought that if he had the chance, he would definitely teach him a lesson. His gaze fell on Yang Guang. "Vice Commander Yang, tell me, what is the truth? Of course, you don't have to be afraid of other people's threats. Just tell the truth. With this minister here, no one will dare to make things difficult for you." Yi Ming said this not to support Yang Chendong, but to guide him to refute Sun Chendong and deny the fact that the greatest contributor in this battle was Yang Chendong. If a minister of war were to question a vice commander, the latter would be scared to the point of wetting his pants. However, Yang Guang, who had just experienced a battle, was full of admiration for Yang Chendong. How could he dare to speak ill of him? He immediately kowtowed to the ground. This general does not dare to speak nonsense. What Commander Sun said is the truth. Wow! As soon as Yang Guang's words fell, the crowd once again exclaimed in surprise. Since the two generals had said the same thing, it seemed that this matter was true. However, how could Yang Chendong kill anyone he pointed at? Could it be that he had some kind of sorcery? Yiming stood there with an ugly expression. The two of them were his subordinates in name, but now they dared to refute him in public. It was truly embarrassing. Fortunately, no one's attention was on him, so he didn't lose too much face. After hearing Sun Chendong and Yang Guang's explanation, the officials finally understood why the loyal Marquis was tired and needed a good rest. It was probably because the sorcery he used was too tiring. Of course, some people who knew immediately thought of the mercenaries who had the most advanced firearms. These people only knew that the mercenaries' firearms were very advanced. As for how advanced they were, they didn't know. After hearing what happened on the battlefield today, they had a new view of the matter. Zhu Qiyu was naturally one of the people who knew. But the more it was like this, the more worried he was. This advanced firearm could easily take a person's life from 1,000 meters away. If that was the case, didn't it mean that if one day they wanted to deal with him, he would also have nowhere to hide? As soon as this thought appeared, it was like a large stone pressing down on him, making it hard for him to breathe. He even felt a little restless. As the emperor, the thing he was most worried about was that he couldn't control the situation. Then he wouldn't be able to decide the life and death of others. At this moment, the joy of winning the battle was no longer as strong. Instead, it was replaced with a worried expression. Zhu Qiyu left first, accompanied by head eunuch Jin Ing. Without the emperor, the officials also lost the mood to celebrate. One by one, they turned and returned to their own residences. With today's victory, they could finally go back and have a good night's sleep. In the Imperial Palace, Zhu Qiyu walked in front with a heavy heart. Behind him, Jin Ing followed step by step. It wasn't until they entered the rear courtyard of the Imperial Palace and there was no one around that he quickened his pace. He was half a step behind the emperor when he said, "Your Majesty, are you worried about the Marquis of Loyalty?" "Yes." Without anyone else around, Zhu Qiyu finally admitted, "The mercenaries' firearms are too advanced. The Marquis of Loyalty has such a good relationship with them. If they..." Zhu Qiyu didn't finish his sentence, but he believed that Jin Ing would understand. In a sense, they were grasshoppers on the same rope. Only when his throne was secure could Jin Ing bask in his glory and hold power. How could Jin Ing not understand this logic? With Zhu Qiyu around, he was the eunuch Jin that everyone admired. Without this emperor, he would probably die without a burial ground. Since the emperor had worries and hidden dangers, he had to think of a way to deal with them. This subject understands. How about this? I will immediately make a trip to the immortal abode and have a chat with the Marquis of Loyalty. At the same time, I will see if there is an opportunity to get in touch with the general of the mercenaries and reach some kind of agreement with them. Jin Ing reported his thoughts to the emperor. Good. Let's work on both sides. In any case, there must be a result. We will not allow anyone who threatens our safety to exist. Zhu Qiyu nodded lightly, his voice carrying a hint of dignity. Immortal Abode. When Yang Chendong returned, he had gained a new title, War God. This was probably what it meant to become a god in a single battle. With just a few pointers, he had created his own legend. According to reliable investigations, not a single member of the great Ming dynasty's army had died in this battle. Only a dozen or so people had been injured in the pursuit because they had been too excited. The achievement of repelling 10,000 enemies with 0 casualties was worthy of this title. This was the benefit of having a weapon that transcended time. It wasn't that the Walla was useless, but rather that the Ghost Shadow Sniper Squad's marksmanship was too miraculous. In the Immortal Abode study, Yang Chendong was listening to the report of the Deputy Chief of the Security Bureau, Yang San, with his eyes closed. Summarizing a battle after a battle was an excellent tradition. Even Yang Chendong was no exception. Before this battle, he had already made plans for the worst-case scenario. That was, the Walla cavalry wouldn't stop and would directly attack. If that were the case, the 4 companies of Cold Vanguard lying in ambush outside the Victory Gate would all attack. If that were the case, no one could guarantee that the Cold Vanguard wouldn't suffer any losses in the chaotic battle. After all, their greatest shortcoming was their lack of numbers. If they really did encounter enemies who didn't fear death, how many people could they kill with 400 guns? Fortunately, The victory gate had been opened wide, allowing Wang Zhan to fantasize about such a smooth battle. You can't rely on luck in war. This must be conveyed to Commander Lang Song, as well as to the ears of every cold vanguard soldier. Yang Chendong heard from Young Ben that some of the cold vanguard soldiers had different opinions about only lying in ambush and not fighting head-on. After saying that the young master was being too careful, his expression became extremely serious. Chapter 201. Yang Chendong didn't blame them for having such thoughts and complaints. After all, they wielded the most advanced weapons in the world and had undergone the strictest training. However, they couldn't afford to be arrogant. Otherwise, they would suffer a setback sooner or later. Since Lung Feng had the intention to underestimate the enemy, they had to correct the situation. Seeing how serious Yang Chendong was, Yang Sen hurriedly took out a notebook and wrote everything down. He couldn't help but nod his head. This subordinate will immediately go to the courtyard to let everyone know about this and let them know that young master cares about them. At the same time, inform them that the Walla's vanguard has been defeated, but Yes Hen won't let it go so easily. There will be at least one more battle. Tell them to be prepared. Yang Chendong nodded his head in satisfaction. Then, he thought of the matter in the Imperial court and asked, "Right after this battle, what are the thoughts of His Majesty and the officials? Has there been any controversy in the Imperial court?" "Young master, this subordinate was just about to report this matter. I just received news from Lord Su Yozhen that not long after you gave the order to open the city gates, the Imperial court learned of this matter. After our investigation, we found that it was probably Commander Sun Tong who sent someone to report this news. Because of this, there are people who are slandering the young master, saying that you are colluding with the Walla. The new Minister of War, Yiming, is the main culprit. The Minister of Revenue, Jean Lian, and the Minister of Works, Shi Pu, have spoken up in support of this matter. It was only after Minister Hu Mang stepped in that these rumors were suppressed. Do you think we should do something in private? The situation in the capital isn't stable at the moment, so it's normal for a few people to be missing." Yang San reported while carefully looking at Yang Chendong. He had already made his intentions clear. Since there were people who wanted to deal with the young master, it would be better to strike first and get rid of him. No. Yang Chendong quickly shook his head upon hearing Yang San's thoughts. The great Ming dynasty's problems don't completely originate from the Imperial court. These people are just representatives of Confucianism. Even if all the ministers in the court are arrested, there will still be people who will be re-elected. This is simply a problem with the system. There is no end to killing people. Yang Chendong was very clear in his heart. Looking at the history of China, ever since the Han dynasty revered only Confucianism, the disciples of the Confucian sect were the privileged class, high and mighty. Over the years, they had become accustomed to it. They monopolized education and the officialdom. They were corrupt, conservative, and stubborn. However, they were so powerful that even the emperor had to give face to them. Often, they would support things that were beneficial to them and oppose things that were not. Yang Chendong's appearance was a threat to them. It was just that the fight had not reached the root of the problem yet, so it had not escalated to the extreme. This was also one of the important reasons why Yang Chendong only developed in the business world. Yang Bao's distribution, Immortal Abode and Sky Beyond Heaven's hot sales, plus the Yang family's bank that was going to be established soon, gave people the feeling that they were thinking of ways to earn money. In the eyes of the Confucians, they were just stained with the stench of money and could not be brought to the table. In truth, all of this was Yang Chendong's intention. He did not come into contact with other industries in order to avoid direct confrontation with the Confucian faction. What he needed to do was slowly infiltrate. Once he had enough influence, some things would naturally come naturally. But before that, not even the emperor could touch this faction, and those who angered him would not have a good end. Why would he want to provoke them? Yi Ming and the others had only tried to undermine him because they did not want to see him gain too much power and merit. In the end, it was still jealousy at work. This sort of mentality was of no consequence to the overall situation, so there was no need to care too much about it. On the contrary, if he killed them now, anyone who wasn't a fool would be able to see that he was the culprit. That would be tantamount to declaring war on the Confucian sect. He wouldn't do such a thankless thing. Yang Chendong had vetoed the decision to attack Yi Ming and the others, so Yang San knew that the time was not right. He immediately expressed that he would only pay attention to these people in the future, but would not take any action. Yang Qindong was very satisfied with Yang San's timely declaration. Very good. The staff of the Security Bureau have worked hard. How about this, when you go out, go to the Chief of Tiger's Mane and get 1,000,000 taels of silver to reward your brothers. Young master, there is still enough silver. Yang San waved his hand, wanting to refuse. In fact, the Security Bureau had never lacked silver. All of this was because Yang Qindong had said that if they wanted to establish an excellent intelligence system, they had to be willing to spend silver. Thus, a steady stream of silver flowed into the Security Bureau. With enough silver, it was much easier to do things with half the effort. Just this treatment alone had attracted the envy and jealousy of many people in the Yang family. However, this matter was requested by Yang Qindong, so even if others had some thoughts, they did not dare to say anything publicly. The Security Bureau was not in the eyes of some of the senior officers of the Yang Consortium's new army, but Yang Qindong's weight and authority were not to be questioned. All right, it's settled then. Go and do your work. Without giving Yang Ben a chance to refuse, Yang Qindong waved his hand and gestured for him to leave. Yang San was touched. He knew that the young master felt sorry for his brothers in the Security Bureau. After all, the members of the Security Bureau were sometimes like mice that could not see the sun. Most of them lived in the dark. In order to keep their identities secret, they could not contact their families, get married, and have children. They had to give up all their youth. Sometimes, in order to obtain important information, they had to work hard for a few months, half a year, or even longer. Giving more silver was one of Yang Qindong's ways of compensating them. Yang Sen suddenly raised his right hand and gave a standard military salute before leaving the study. Not long after, Tiger's Mane strode in. There were not many people who could come to Yang Qindong's side without reporting. Other than Hu Yen and the other girls, only Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei had such qualifications. Young master, Eunuch Jining is here. He said he brought a new edict from His Majesty. As soon as Tiger's Mane entered the room and saw Yang Qindong leaning against the chair with his eyes closed, he said carefully. Yang Qindong, whose eyes were still closed, acted as if he did not hear Tiger's Mane's words. He asked, "Has the 1,000,000 taels of silver been sent to the Security Bureau?" "Yes, it's been sent. It's the remuneration that His Majesty gave to Lung Feng." "That's good. Arrange a side hall. I'll go see Jining." Yang Qindong slowly opened his eyes. After he got up and stretched, his eyes shone with a dazzling luster again. At this moment, Jining had come to see him. Even if he used his toes to think, he would know why. It seemed that Zhu Qiyu was not confident. Zhu Qiyu was indeed not confident. On one hand, he wanted to use the mercenaries to defeat Walla's great enemy. On the other hand, he was worried that the mercenaries would threaten his safety after their victory. To guard against people and to use people at the same time. Under such contradictory psychology, Jining had come. In the side hall, Yang Qindong and Jining met. After greeting each other, they sat down in their respective seats. Eunuch Jin first praised the loyal Marquis's performance today, and even called him a military god. Both the embroidered uniform guards and the East Faction guards had their own intelligence agencies. Because they had been established for a long time, their strength could not be underestimated. For example, the fact that Yang Qindong was called a military god could not be hidden from Jin Ying's eyes and ears. Haha, Eunuch Jin must be joking. "It's all thanks to His Majesty's good fortune," Yang Qindong said modestly with a smile. This battle was won by relying on the advanced firearms of the mercenaries. His Majesty is just someone who spent money. Jining chuckled, but as he spoke, he pointed out the crux of the problem. This eunuch was clear about everything. "You're just a military god who used advanced firearms. It can't be taken seriously. Moreover, even if the mercenaries were hired, the emperor would be the one paying for it. Your contribution would be even less." Yes, Eunuch Jin's words are very true. Yang Qindong's expression did not change. He did not even have the intention to deny it. For this matter, Zhu Qiyu had spent 10,000,000 taels of silver. Although half of it had been in the form of property, it was still wealth. The fact that Yang Qindong had so easily admitted it made Jining feel like he had punched cotton, and his complexion turned rather nasty. When he had come, He had already prepared himself for Yang Chendong to ask for a reward. He had even prepared the words of reprimand so that he could use this opportunity to suppress this marquis of loyalty and valor. But Wang Chendong had no intention of asking for a reward. So what could he do? He couldn't just go and reprimand a meritorious subject without a word. If he did that, he would be going too far. After all, the main force of the Walla had yet to arrive at the capital. If he got rid of the donkey after it had left the millstone and he couldn't deal with the mercenaries, wouldn't the capital be in danger? He could not bear such a heavy responsibility. Yang Chendong's low profile and modesty had ruined Jianying's plans. But Jianying had followed several emperors, so he was able to react quickly. He looked at Yang Chendong and said, "Marquis of loyalty and valor. His Majesty is extremely satisfied with the performance of the mercenaries in this battle. He ordered this duke to reward the mercenaries no matter what. The Imperial kitchen has prepared a lot of food for this occasion. Marquis Yang, why don't you tell them so that they can make things easier for you? At the very least, His Majesty should act as a host." Listening to Jianying's words, Wang Chendong knew that Jianying still wanted to go around him and get in touch with the mercenaries. Since this was the case and they had prepared delicious food, how could he not take advantage of this opportunity? If he could save on the Immortal Abode's food, why not? He smiled and said, "All right, since it's His Majesty's wish, this marquis will send someone to accompany Jin Gonggong to the mercenary camp's courtyard." Chapter 202. Yang Chendong was so cooperative. Not only did he agree, but he also did not go personally. This greatly exceeded Jianying's expectations. He had originally thought that even if he agreed, he would go along and reap the benefits. Of course, Yang Chendong would not go with them. This was what Jianying wanted to see. He did not stand on ceremony. "In that case, I'll have to trouble you, Duke of Loyalty." "Haha, no problem, no problem." Seeing that Jianying did not invite him to go with them, Yang Chendong looked at him with annoyance. He could even imagine that once Zhu Qiyu really contacted the mercenaries, she would immediately kick him out. She might even find a crime to confiscate his family property. This was the scheming of an emperor. Sometimes, the emperor would turn hostile and refuse to acknowledge the other party's kindness. However, no matter how much Zhu Qiyu calculated, he would never have thought that the real mastermind behind the mercenaries was Yang Chendong. His methods would be useless in the end. In fact, it was not just Zhu Qiyu. None of the old foxes in the imperial court would have thought that the mercenaries, who had such advanced firearms, would have anything to do with a young man who was not even 20 years old. It was precisely because no one could guess that Yang Chendong did not cause everyone to boycott him in advance. Jianying left happily. Tiger's Mane followed Yang Chendong's orders and accompanied him to the courtyard of the mercenaries' barracks. Yang Chendong had mentioned this when he met with Commander Lang Song and the others yesterday. Once they won the battle and displayed their great strength, the emperor of the Great Ming dynasty would certainly think of a way to contact them and deepen their relationship. This was something that would be difficult to avoid. Instead of thinking of all sorts of ways and excuses to avoid it, it was better to meet them openly. In any case, there would be no promises. On the contrary, there would be some benefits. Why not? Jianying did not know about this. He only knew that if he had the chance to meet with the mercenaries alone, as long as he could establish a good relationship with them and make them work for him, it would infinitely increase his authority. In this way, even in front of the emperor, Zhu Qiyu, he would be able to speak with more confidence. Led by Tiger's Man, Jianying brought a group of embroidered uniform guards and a young eunuch from the palace to the courtyard of the mercenaries' military camp. With Yang Chendong's previous instructions, the group naturally entered without a hitch. Here, Jianying met the leader of the mercenaries for the first time, Lang Song, whom the soldiers addressed as commander. Although she didn't know what the commander's official title was, seeing how respectful the others were towards Lang Song, Jianying's intuition told her that there would only be benefits and no harm in getting closer to this person. Immediately, his face bloomed like a flower as he quickly stepped forward and took the initiative to greet Lang Song. Aya. Commander Lang is indeed a man of striking appearance. You are young and promising. You truly make me envious. As soon as he arrived in front of Lang Song, he listened to everything that was good. Lang Song, who had long been prepared and had a certain understanding of eunuchs, said with a straight face, "Are you the leader of the eunuchs by the great Ming Emperor's side?" "Very good. Since the items have been delivered, You may leave. Lang Song's expression was so resolute and cold that Jin Ying's expression changed after hearing it. What kind of person was he? He was Zhu Qiyu's favorite. To put it bluntly, if he didn't like anyone now, he only needed to say a word in front of Dai Zong. Even if that person didn't die, they would lose a layer of skin. Other people couldn't wait to curry favor with him. Who would dare to speak to him in such a tone? However, Lang Song had done so, and yet he still didn't have the slightest bit of temper. He didn't dare to show Lang Song any displeasure, and he didn't even dare to say a single harsh word. This made Jin Ying's heart tighten. However, he was someone who was used to being a eunuch. He had suffered many grievances, so the speed at which he stabilized his state of mind was still very fast. After adjusting his state of mind, he looked at Lang Song and said with the same smile, "Commander Lung, I am here on behalf of the great Ming Emperor to thank you all. Sending these foods is merely a small token of our sincerity. My emperor's intention is for me to come and see if there is anything lacking here. If you have any requests, feel free to ask." Jin Ying appeared to be very heroic. As long as they could rope in mercenaries, they felt that paying a certain price was necessary and worth it. Jin Ying even had a bold idea, and that was to use mercenaries to deal with Zhu Qizhen of Ying's sect and complete the great matter of the great Ming dynasty's unification. Lang Song silently looked at Jin Ying. The sixth young master was truly a godly person. 2 days ago, he had already guessed that after winning the battle, Zhu Qizhen of Ying's sect would spend money to rope him in. Wasn't this happening now? Since such a good thing had been delivered to him, how could he not accept it? Lang Song, who had been very cold, suddenly smiled. In Jin Ying's eyes, this smile was like 100 flowers blooming. It actually made him feel as if his heart was bursting with joy. Eunuch Jin is too polite. Since this is the case, how much can the great Ming Emperor give us if we lack copper and iron? He actually made a request. Jin Ying was overjoyed. He knew that this was very likely a way to strengthen the bond between him and the mercenaries. Not to mention copper and iron, as long as the great Ming dynasty had it, they probably wouldn't be stingy in the slightest. Well said, well said. The mercenaries have helped us defend against foreign enemies, so you are our best friends. Whatever you need, we will find a way to satisfy you. Since Jin Ying had agreed so readily, Lang Song naturally had to express his gratitude. He laughed heartily and invited the other party into the depths of the barracks. On the surface, the relationship between the two sides seemed to be quickly warming up. Jin Ying and Lang Song took this opportunity to get to know each other better, and reached a certain consensus. When he left, Jin Ying's face was filled with excitement, as if an old tree had just bloomed. When the other junior eunuchs saw this, they felt an inexplicable sense of fear. They seemed to have seen eunuch Jin Ying regain his manly vigor. He was probably going to find them at any time to have some fun. There were many times when the world of eunuchs was unknown to outsiders, and they couldn't understand it. Perverted people often had many perverted methods, and these methods were often used to make senior eunuchs happy, while the junior eunuchs had nothing left to live for. Not long after Jin Ying left, an inconspicuous man dressed as a woodcutter walked out from the rear courtyard of the barracks, heading straight for the immortal abode. No one knew that this inconspicuous man was a secret agent from the Security Bureau. He wanted to report the details of Lang Song and Jin Ying's conversation to the sixth young master. In the palace, Jin Ying was delighted to see Zhu Qiyu. She then truthfully reported to Zhu Qiyu what she had discussed with Commander Lung. Your Majesty, this subject has already found out that the headquarters of the mercenaries are at sea, on a large ship. They don't have a fixed residence, and will go wherever they are needed. Most of the mercenaries are from the great Ming dynasty, but because they can't survive under the harsh governance of the local officials, they have no choice but to take the risk and seek a living at sea. Jin Ying proudly told Zhu Qiyu everything she knew about the mercenaries. Those corrupt officials. When Zhu Qiyu heard this, his face was filled with anger. For such talented people to be chased out of the country, those local officials were the sinners of the country. Yes, corrupt officials should be killed. But if it weren't for their actions, these people would only be decent soldiers at best. Without advanced firearms, they would be no different from the ordinary soldiers of the great Ming dynasty. Through her understanding of Zhu Qiyu over the past few days, Jin Ying had more or less seen through him. This emperor was the type who had great ambitions. He truly wanted to become a famous ruler and strengthen the great Ming dynasty. However, some things couldn't be changed by one's will. If he truly wanted to revive the great Ming dynasty, there were still too many things that needed to be done. How to strengthen the great Ming dynasty was a grand goal to begin with. It was difficult to explain in a short amount of time. Jining wanted to talk about the problem at hand, so Guqing continued. Your Majesty, it's because of the advanced firearms that these mercenaries possess undefeatable battle prowess. From chatting with Commander Lang Song, this subject found out that it was because the loyal Marquis had unintentionally made a business deal with them that he gained their basic trust. For example, most of the goods sold in Heavens Beyond Heaven were provided by the mercenaries. After Yang Chendong obtained them, he sold them at a high price to the merchants and commoners of the great Ming dynasty. Speaking of which, he's the blood-sucking one of the most corrupt officials. That's right. Although the loyal Marquis is young, his ambitions aren't small. This person isn't easy to get along with. If there's an opportunity in the future, we have to think of a way to get rid of him. Zhu Qiyu nodded in agreement. Ever since he ascended the throne, Yang Chendong had been demanding things from him. He didn't behave like a subject should. It was precisely because Yang Chendong protected his imperial brother, Zhu Qizhen, that the great Ming dynasty was suddenly split into two halves. Although he did contribute to the defense of the capital this time, how much money did he get from the great Ming dynasty's treasury and how much imperial property? A subject who profited from the country's war was truly infuriating and deserved to be killed. If it weren't for the fact that the defense of the capital was imminent, in a fit of anger, he might have already issued a decree to kill Yang Chendong. Seeing that the emperor was full of loathing for the loyal Marquis, Jining Nai felt a burst of joy in his heart. This was exactly what he wanted. Yang Chendong's wealth and influence were simply too tempting. If he could get rid of this person, the profits would definitely not be small. Most importantly, if he got rid of this person, he would be able to privately contact the mercenaries and become the link and bridge between them and the great Ming dynasty's commerce. At that time, would he still have to worry about a steady flow of money? Yes, Your Majesty is right. However, these are all trivial matters at the moment. How to maintain a close relationship with the mercenaries is the most important thing. This subject thinks like this. First, we need to get closer to each other so that they won't have any ideas about us. Second, we need to make them work for us. With their support and assistance, it won't be difficult to drive away Walla or defeating Zhong. We can even buy a large number of advanced firearms from them. It won't be impossible for us to expand our territory and strengthen our great Ming. Chapter 203. Zhu Qiyu's blood surged when he heard Jin Ying's words. Wasn't this person talking about his life goal? When he heard that he could buy a large amount of advanced firearms from the mercenaries, he became even more excited. Beloved official, are they really willing to sell such advanced firearms to us? Zhu Qiyu couldn't be blamed for asking this question. The mercenaries' strength lay in their advanced firearms. If everyone used the same level of weapons, the great Ming dynasty, which had sufficient soldiers, could destroy the mercenaries in minutes. Selling one's foundation to others was a short-sighted action. Zhu Qiyu didn't think that this matter was very feasible. It's possible. Your Majesty, to be honest, this subject also thought that it was impossible. However, when Commander Lang mentioned that he needed a large amount of copper and iron, this subject casually mentioned that Your Majesty was very interested in the advanced firearms in their hands. Unexpectedly, Commander Lang agreed on the spot that as long as we could provide them with the materials they needed, he would personally gift us an advanced firearm as a tribute to Your Majesty. As for the need for more firearms, he would need to return to the sea and report to his leader before he could make a decision. When Jining said this, he was eloquent and eloquent. From the looks of it, he was clearly trying to show off his achievements. Is that really possible? That's great. This way, we can give them as much copper and iron as they need, as long as we have them in our national treasury. Although we can only get one first, we have a lot of skilled craftsmen in the great Ming dynasty. So, we will be able to imitate them very soon. At that time, we will be able to sweep the world. Ha ha ha. Zhu Qiyu's brain reacted very quickly. At this moment, he seemed to be able to see many advanced firearms at his disposal and the scene of him conquering the world. Yes, this subject understands. Seeing that Zhu Qiyu had agreed, Jining also sighed in relief. Previously, he had agreed to the other party's request for copper and iron without asking the emperor for permission. He was afraid that he would be blamed. Now, It seemed that he didn't need to worry. But then again, in order to obtain an advanced firearm and the friendship of the mercenaries, the price they had paid this time was too great. Just the copper and iron alone was promised to be 1,000,000 tons. This was already 3/5 of the amount in the Great Ming Dynasty's national treasury, and it had been accumulated since the time when they became ancestors. Looking at it this way, the capital they paid was too much. But when he thought about the friendship between the two countries and an advanced firearm, it seemed to be worth it. Immortal Abode. The information from the Security Bureau was sent to Yang Chendong. Ha ha ha, very good, it's done. In the study, Yang Chendong's joyful laughter could be heard. There were a lot of science and technology books stored in the warehouse. They were supposed to be distributed to the troops for them to study. Now, Yang Chendong took out a portion of it and gave it to the researchers in Crimson City. Those people were originally 1 in 1,000 talents. Now that they had the materials they could learn from, they could do things with half the effort. The development of the city was changing day by day. With ready-made firearms and detailed books, it was not difficult for him to not improve. The only thing that hindered its development was the lack of raw materials. For this matter, Yang Chendong had even made preparations to attack the Japanese Empire. As everyone knew, the Japanese Empire was located in the middle of the ocean and was made up of several islands. Because of its special geographical location, they had a lot of gold and steel mines. These were the things that Xianxia needed to develop. However, the Ryukyu kingdom had not been completely stabilized. If he sent troops to the Japanese Empire now, he would feel that he was stretched thin, which was why it had not taken shape yet. In the end, there was too little time, and the number of troops in Xianxia's army was too small. Since he could not immediately attack the Japanese Empire, Yang Chendong had to reconsider where he could get more copper and iron for Crimson City's development. After thinking about it, his target was still the Great Ming Dynasty. He wondered if he could use Zhu Qiyu's eagerness to make a fuss. Leng Song did not disappoint. After negotiating with Jin Ing, he managed to get 1,000,000 tons of copper and iron. With these things, it could be imagined that the problem of Crimson City's raw materials had been temporarily solved. How could he not be happy? As for whether or not the Great Ming Dynasty would replicate the advanced firearms, Yang Chendong was not too worried. Even with a ready-made firearm, it would take a long time to replicate it. When that time came, who knew what the situation would be like? Who knew? Who knew? Without the corresponding books and guidance of others, who knew how long it would take to create a new firearm just by relying on a finished product? Who knew how many detours there would be? As for what could be done with this advanced firearm, without the corresponding bullets, it was just a decoration and could not threaten anyone. The important thing was that he had obtained 1,000,000 tons of copper and iron. Moreover, Zhu Qiyu had personally agreed to it. Even if it was shipped out of the capital to the sea, it would still be justified. Just as he was thinking about how Ji Ning had helped him greatly, more intelligence from the Security Bureau arrived. It was an intelligence report on the Walla's army. It had to be said that the Walla cavalry was truly an elite force. Not only did they charge quickly, they also fled quickly. It had not been long since the battle in the morning, but their deserters had already retreated 300 li and found the main force of the Walla's army. According to the intelligence report, the Walla's army only had 60,000 soldiers, but it was said to be 200,000. After reorganizing the vanguard that had escaped, they were rapidly marching toward the capital. Of the 50,000 soldiers, there were 40,000 cavalry and 10,000 infantry. It had to be said that the steppe truly was rich in healthy horses. In this aspect, the Great Ming Dynasty could not compare. In the absence of modern chariots, Yang Chendong was also considering building a cavalry team. He had even prepared a candidate. It was a young man named Windchaser. This person had lived on the steppe since he was young and was extremely familiar with horses. Even more amazing was that he even understood horse language and could communicate with healthy horses in an extremely short amount of time. With such talent, he should have been able to do well on the steppe. However, fate played a little joke on him. Because his mother was quite beautiful, the leader of the local tribe took a fancy to her. First, he killed his father, then he took his mother by force, forcing his staunch mother to die on the spot. At the time, Zhu Feng was only 12 years old. In a fit of rage, he killed the leader and took revenge for his parents. Then, he rode a healthy horse and fled to the Central Plains. After fleeing for 6 years, He coincidentally joined the Xianxia's new army. A while ago, Zhu Feng had already passed the strict test of the Cold Front and was approved by the commander, Lang Song, to bring the 9 Cold Front members back to the steppe. He used his status as the squad leader to gather information and secretly accumulate strength. The matter of Zhu Feng only flashed through his mind. The main force of the Walla was already here. How to deal with them was the problem that Yang Chendong needed to consider. With the death of the Vanguard Army's Journal King, he was afraid that they would not listen to his orders to set up a formation in front of the city and wait for his roll call. It was very likely that when the city gates opened, they would all rush into the city. If that was the case, it would be difficult to control the situation with just the 400 Cold Front members. Therefore, not letting the enemy enter the city was a prerequisite. Defending the city did not satisfy Yang Chendong. He needed to attack and not passively defend. The great Ming dynasty could not allow the Mongol tribes to bully them. If they could only defend when they were at their doorstep, this was definitely a disgrace. Take the initiative to attack and kill our way out. This thought quickly flashed through Yang Chendong's mind. He got up and went next door. There, Tiger's Mane and the others had already set up a reconstruction sand table based on the information from the Security Bureau. Striding in front of the sand table, Yang Chendong's gaze swept across the table. One plan after another was quickly formed or rejected. Gradually, the battle plan became more and more mature. Walla Army Camp. After attacking for an entire night, it could be said that the men and horses were tired. Most of the soldiers were resting in their tents. However, as the leader, Yes Hen could not sleep. He was holding an impromptu meeting with his generals to consider the upcoming battle with the great Ming dynasty. Participating in the meeting was his other brother, Boramo, the general's grandfather, and other tall Mongol warriors with a valiant aura. Everyone, the news of the Journal King's defeat and death should be known to everyone. What do you think? As the de facto leader of Walla, Yes Hen had a dignified aura. Compared to the great Ming dynasty, the people of Walla acted more rudely and directly. As soon as Yes Hen finished speaking, the general's grandfather took the initiative to stand up and loudly said, "Leader, we have the world's fastest horses and superb riding and archery skills. We only need to rush into the great Ming dynasty's capital. With our warriors, who can stop us?" As for the periodical king being killed, I think he simply wanted to imitate the Han people and hold a meeting before the battle. This gave the other side the opportunity to be attacked by our unknown hidden weapons. It's nothing to worry about. The general's grandfather was a famous warrior in Walla. He was known for his extraordinary strength and superb archery skills. After many military achievements, he was favored by Yes Hen. Naturally, when he spoke, there was no need to worry so much. Yes, we only need to kill with our army. At that time, no matter what the other side has, they will not be able to succeed. Facing Emperor Ingzong's 500,000 troops, we can win. Now, there are only 10,000 enemies. It is not enough to worry about. After the general's grandfather took the lead, the other generals also shouted loudly and expressed their opinions. Chapter 204. These generals were mostly brave warriors. Perhaps they wouldn't have any problems fighting on the battlefield, but when it came to strategizing, they were far too lacking. Yes Hen lightly shook his head. He wasn't as straightforward as the other Mongolians. Instead, he was a cunning Walla leader, as cunning as a rabbit. During the Battle of the Tumu Fortress, it was because of his cautiousness and caution that they were able to achieve a great victory. Since the periodical king had already been defeated and even died, he naturally wouldn't recklessly advance. He wasn't very satisfied with the words of these martial artists. Instead, he turned his gaze to his younger brother, Borromeo. Borromeo and the periodical king were both Yeshen's younger brothers. However, their personalities were completely different. The latter was fond of grandiose achievements and liked to take everything for granted. However, he was a man of few words and usually gave off a gloomy feeling. It wasn't that Borromeo wasn't good at talking. On the contrary, he was a person who planned before taking action. He was used to observing others and then making the most correct decision based on everyone's performance. However, those who were good at observing others generally had very accurate intuition. When he felt Yeshen's gaze on him, his expression became serious. "Elder brother, this subject brother also thinks that General Nigong and the others are right. Our current advantage is that we have a strong army. As long as we take a steady approach, taking down the Great Ming's capital will be just around the corner. How do we take a steady approach? Yes Hen, who valued his younger brother's opinion very much, asked. In the words of the Han people, it's called step by step. Obviously, Borromeo had already thought of a countermeasure. When his elder brother asked, he gave the answer without hesitation. Step by step? Yes Hen was very interested in this idea. Tell me in detail. Yes. In fact, the method is very simple. In order to prevent the Great Ming's defeat from happening to us, we can take a divided approach. That is, one army will be at the front, one army in the middle, and one army will be at the back. This way, no matter which army is attacked, we can look after each other and support each other. If we don't encounter any attacks along the way, we will enter the Great Ming Dynasty's capital in batches. Remember, don't learn from the king of magazines. Don't stop. Just focus on attacking. If there's really a problem, just turn around and retreat. The army behind you will naturally support you. Not bad, not bad. Yes Hen nodded in agreement when he heard Borromeo's opinion. By dividing the army into 3 groups, it was guaranteed that no matter what went wrong, Walla's main force would still be there, and the army would not be completely wiped out. Yes Hen laughed heartily when he realized the benefits of the art of war. All right, we'll do as you say. How about this? General Nigong will take 10,000 men as the vanguard, that child Borromeo will take 20,000 men as the center, and this chief will bring up the rear to ensure everyone's safety. Yes. After receiving the order, the generals placed their right hands in front of their chests and saluted Yes Hen. There was a change in the strategy. The Walla army that was supposed to arrive at the capital at dusk on the second day did not arrive as scheduled. On the contrary, the Security Bureau personnel sent out ran until 3 horses died and sent back important news. The Walla army was actually advancing toward the capital in 3 groups. In the mercenary compound, Yang Qindong, Commander Lung Song, and the others were waiting for news from the front lines. This time, the main force of the Walla army was coming. It would be very difficult to use the previous method of naming to deal with them. This time, it would be a hard battle of saber against saber, spear against spear. Emperor Zhu Qiyu had already sent people to inquire about the situation more than once. Even eunuch Ji Ning had taken the initiative to come once. Because of Yang Qindong's presence, he left after a brief exchange of greetings. Lang Song had told him before that it was best not to let the loyalty marquis know about their deal. Otherwise, based on the fact that this person had an extremely good relationship with the leader of the mercenaries, it was very likely that he would interfere and ruin the plan. Of course, this was Yang Qindong's idea. Even his cooperation with Zhu Qiyu had to be as mysterious as possible. In his view, the more mysterious something was, the more people would believe it was real and would not be suspicious. As expected, Ji Ning listened to Lang Song's words. When he saw Yang Qindong here, he took the initiative to leave. Before leaving, he gave Lang Song a look that only the 2 of them could understand. Yang Qindong had seen this out of the corner of his eye, but he still pretended not to see it. While everyone was waiting, the Security Bureau finally sent back news. When they learned that the Walla army had not gathered together and had instead divided into 3 groups, Yang Qindong wanted to throw his head back and laugh. Previously, he had been worried that the Tile army would launch a collective attack. If that was the case, with the 10,000 Great Ming soldiers under his command and the 400 Cold Vanguard soldiers, it would truly be difficult to ensure the safety of the 12 gates of the capital. As for going out to look for opportunities, the difference in numbers was too great. It was difficult to say whether they could protect themselves and annihilate the enemy. Since he was leading the army into battle, if he only wanted to win, his expectations were too low. What Yang Qindong wanted was a complete victory. He wanted to obtain the greatest victory with the least losses. It was indeed very difficult to achieve this. However, now that the Walla had taken the initiative to divide their forces, the situation was completely different. After dividing their forces, the Walla's advantage in numbers was gone. Yang Qindong could fight according to his plans. He strode to the sand table and looked at the 3-dimensional map that was almost engraved in his mind twice with his bright eyes. He suddenly pointed at a place called Willowtown and said, "It's here. Let's encircle the enemy and attack the reinforcements." Encircle the enemy and attack the reinforcements? Lang Song and the others were all excited when they heard this. Their eyes flashed. Yang Chendong had once introduced encircling the enemy and attacking the reinforcements in the tactical learning class. This was an effective method to annihilate the enemy. It would only be used when the enemy's numbers exceeded a certain level. When everyone was still thinking about the essence of encircling the enemy and attacking the reinforcements, Yang Chendong took a pointer and pointed at the sand table and said, "Everyone look, this place is called Willow Town. The local people call it Willow Ditch. There is only one main road in the town that runs from east to west. The north and south sides are filled with huge ditches. There was a heavy rain a while ago, so there should be a lot of water in the ditches. Immediately send people there. If the ditches in the north and south are filled, immediately inform the people there to evacuate." With a resolute voice, Yang Chendong gave the military order. At the same time, Tiger's Mane had already walked out of the meeting room and arranged for fast horses to investigate the situation in Willow Town. "When the scouts come back with the specific information, we will hold a meeting overnight and then make preparations overnight. We have less than 24 hours to prepare. I hope everyone will be alert." Yang Chendong's gaze swept across Lang Song, Xiao Feng, Teng Shan, Wu Shang, and the others. Yes. Everyone's bodies quickly tensed up and stood at attention. At the same time, their eyes lit up. Generals were never afraid of war. Although they also hoped for world peace, their mission made them never shrink back when war came. In their hearts, they even hoped to achieve great things on the battlefield. The scouts left the city in the night. Now that the 5 city warden departments were under Yang Chendong's command, it was very easy to send people out of the city. 4 hours later, the fast horses came back from Willow Town, which was 30 li away. They reported that the ditches were filled with water, and that the ditches were 2 zhang wide and 1 zhang deep. Inform Vice Commander Yang Chendong and the 5 commanders to come here for a meeting. Hearing that the situation was as he had expected, Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with determination. Not long after the order was given, Yang Guang's group of 6 arrived at the mercenaries' courtyard. This was the first time they had walked in here, so they were a bit nervous. After all, to the outside world, this army was too mysterious. It was so mysterious that even they did not know much about it. The dark night added a bit of mystery to the courtyard. The 6 people followed the torches that led them to the meeting room, so they did not see their surroundings clearly. When they entered the brightly lit meeting room, the 6 people lost their ability to observe their surroundings. All of this was because Yang Chendong, dressed in green, was standing in front of them. Ever since the previous time when he completely defeated Walla's vanguard, Yang Chendong had the title of War God. He enjoyed a very high status and influence in the army. After this matter, Tao Jin, Yang Jie, Mao Fushou, and Gao Liao regretted it. They originally thought that with a war on the horizon, staying in the capital to maintain law and order was a very safe job. If the situation turned bad, they could immediately escape from the capital. But who would have thought that the defeated Great Ming army would be able to display such power in the hands of the loyal Marquis? This was great. They had defeated the enemy effortlessly and obtained military merits, but they didn't get any credit at all. Their hearts were extremely unbalanced, so they made up their minds that they would participate in the next war no matter what. When they saw Yang Chendong, a feeling of respect naturally flowed out from the bottom of their hearts. "You're all here." Looking at Yang Guang's group of 6, Yang Chendong nodded slightly. His gaze then landed on Tao Jin's group of 4 as he asked, "Everyone, the battle is imminent. It's better if you each lead some men to guard the city and maintain law and order." No. When Tao Jin's group of 4 heard that they were going to be excluded again, how could they be willing? They immediately shook their heads like a rattle drum, and their faces instantly became very ugly. "So you're saying that you want to participate in the war?" Yang Chendong asked with a surprised expression. In fact, this result was already within his expectations. Since there were benefits, who would stand by and do nothing? Chapter 205. Yes, we want to join the war. Tao Jin and the other 3 held their chests high, as if they were using their actions to tell Yang Chendong that they were men, and they were also the young generals of the 5 cities warden's office. Seeing that the 4 of them were so determined, Yang Chendong nodded his head. "Since you want to join the war, Marquis can agree to it. But there is one thing that needs to be emphasized. On the battlefield, No matter who it is, they must obey military orders. If anyone disobeys, they will be punished by military law and beheaded without mercy. Yang Qindong spoke seriously, but Tao Jin and the other four were even more serious. They nodded their heads solemnly, indicating that they would listen to Yang Qindong's orders and arrangements. Since that is the case, come over, I will announce the battle plan. Yang Qindong turned around and walked towards the sand table. He held a pointer in his hand and pointed at the sand table as he spoke of the battle situation and issued orders. According to the scouts, Walla's army is divided into 3 groups and is heading towards the capital. The first group is a vanguard of 10,000 cavalry, led by General Walla's grandfather. Marquis has seriously studied this man. He is a man who is not afraid of death. His personality is straightforward and he kills without blinking an eye on the battlefield. But usually, this kind of person will not beat around the bush. If Marquis did not guess wrongly, he will definitely take the shortest route to the capital tomorrow. Then Willow Town will be his only route. Willow Town. There is only one road from east to west. There are more than 2,000 people and more than 500 families in the town. The south and north of the town are surrounded by 2 ditches that are 2 zhang wide and 1 zhang deep respectively. It can be said that once we enter the town, as long as we block both ends, there will be no other way out. And what we need to do is to block them here. Tangshan, Tao Jin, Gao Li, where are you? We are here. The 3 people who were called out stepped forward and came in front of Yang Qindong. Marquis ordered that Tao Jin and Gao Li each take 1,000 soldiers. Tangshan, take 100 men from your 3rd company and set up a defense at the exit of Willow Town. Remember, your mission is to block the enemy here and not allow them to advance even an inch. At that time, you may be able to suppress the enemy's charge with long-range shots. Yang Jia, Mao Fusho, each of you will lead 1,000 men and cooperate with Xiao Feng's company of 100 men. When you see Walla's vanguard cavalry enter Willow Gully, you will immediately close the gap. This will restrict a portion of the enemy's forces and reduce the pressure on our allies. At the same time, you must prevent the enemy from breaking out from here. Sun Tong, take 1,000 men and cooperate with 4th Company Commander Wu Shang. Wait for Walla's main force, which is that child Borromeo's troops, to send reinforcements to Naigong. No matter how fierce the attack is, you must not take a step back. When Xiao Feng, Yang Jia, and Mao Fusho stabilize the situation, they will come to support you. No need, we can handle it. Wu Sheng stepped forward confidently. He looked as if he could complete his mission and didn't need anyone's help. It's good to be confident, but don't feel too much pressure. Also, when you can't hold on any longer, there will be orders for you. At that time, you can retreat to the side and open up a path for that child, Borromeo. Let him enter Willow Gully and become a turtle in a jar just like grandfather. Yang Qindong was very satisfied with Wu Shang's performance. As a soldier, one must have the spirit of fighting for the sake of thousands of people. Otherwise, one wouldn't be an outstanding soldier. After patting Wu Shang's shoulder and having him back down, Yang Qindong's gaze fell on Lang Song and Yang Guang, who hadn't been named yet. Your mission is to restrict Walla's leader, Yes Hen. No matter what, you can't let them advance too smoothly. Yes Hen is a very cunning and suspicious person. As long as he senses danger, he naturally won't recklessly advance. Once the time is right, I'll give the order. All you need to do is lead the army and charge over. When that time comes, you'll have done a great service. Yes, Lang Song and Yang Guang confidently replied. They had absolute faith in Yang Qindong. Since this was his order, it naturally couldn't be wrong. Okay, the order has been given. Is there anyone else who doesn't understand? If there isn't, immediately return to the armory and get a strong bow. Remember, other than cavalry, don't even think about engaging in close combat with the enemy. Just attack from afar. After assigning all the tasks, Yang Qindong calmly waved his hand. Although his blood was boiling at this moment, as a commander, he still needed to maintain his cool. This sort of performance would play a vital role in calming the soldiers. With this order, the army immediately began to get busy. What should have been a peaceful night in the capital was now bustling with activity. The army needed to prepare for battle and leave the city. Such an important matter had to be reported to the emperor and approved. Yang Qindong gave this task to Sun Tong. Marquis Yang, This general really didn't do it on purpose. When eunuch Jin sent someone to find me, I truly had no other choice. Sun Tong saw that Yang Qindong had given him this task and hurriedly tried to explain. He did not want to offend Yang Qindong because of this, as this would only bring him benefits. It's fine. Marquis knows of your difficulties and can understand. There's no need to think too much about it. Yang Qindong had a smile on his face, but it was just a formal smile. No one knew what he was thinking behind this smile. No, Marquis Yang. This general truly admires you. I have already regretted what I did before. This time, please send someone else. Sun Tong kept shaking his head, as if he wanted to express his determination. Yang Qindong stepped forward and placed a hand on Sun Tong's shoulder as he chuckled. Okay, Marquis understands your intentions. How about this? You still need to report. This time, it is Marquis who has asked you to go. It will be different from last time. This smile was much more sincere than before, and Sun Tong immediately nodded in understanding. Although one did not have a very high position in the 5 cities warden's office, one still needed to be smooth and slick in dealing with people, and one also needed to be smart. Satisfied, Sun Tong left and headed straight for the Imperial Palace. Not long after, Jining heard the news and met with Sun Tong. She heard about Yang Qindong's plans and determination for this battle. Is the main force of Walla's army coming? Commander Sun, what do you think are our chances of winning this time? Jining did not know much about the battlefield. He did not even know where Willow Town was. However, he was better than Wang Zhan in that he would not casually interfere in things he did not know. For example, when it came to military matters, he did not understand, so he would ask for the opinions of others. I am not very sure either, but looking at the Marquis of Loyalty, he should be very confident. At this moment, we should choose to believe in him. Sun Tong did not dare to directly express his admiration for Yang Qindong, so he changed the way he spoke. Yes, we should believe in him. How about this? I will immediately report this matter to the Emperor. You wait for the tiger tally. Jining nodded and told Sun Tong to wait where he was. He then went to the back of the palace to find the Emperor. It had to be said that Zhu Qiyu was very diligent. He had not yet slept and was still reading some books that the Emperor must read. When Jining went forward and said that Yang Qindong was going to lead the army out of the city to fight Walla, his expression became somewhat nervous. Has Walla's main force arrived so soon? I wonder if the Marquis of Loyalty has made preparations. Your Majesty, with the help of the mercenaries, I think there will be no problem. Commander Sun Tong of the Warden's Office of the 5 cities has come to ask for your opinion and ask for the tiger tally to lead the army out of the city. Your Majesty, what do you think? Jining asked carefully. The political power of the Ming dynasty was actually composed of civil and military officials, eunuchs, and the embroidered uniform guards. According to the rules of the past, when the army went out to war, there must be an accompanying eunuch to supervise the army. Only then would the emperor be at ease. However, this obviously did not work for Yang Qindong. Last time, he had refused to accompany the emperor, and the emperor had also agreed. If they were to send an eunuch this time, would the other party think too much? However, if there were no eunuchs accompanying him, if he handed over the tiger tally so easily, the emperor would not even have the strength to fight back once he had other thoughts. What are you looking at? Since the Marquis of Loyalty is going to deal with Walla's army, just give him the tiger tally. Don't worry. Yang Qindong is the youngest son of Lord Yang Rong. He won't do anything to me. Zhu Qiyu clearly saw Jin Ying's worry. However, he had his own plans. In his opinion, Yang Qindong was a little unique in his way of doing things, but he should not have any thoughts about the throne. Otherwise, when he saved Yingzong, he could have held the emperor hostage and ordered his vassals. However, he did not do so. Now, he would not do something like rebelling. Since the emperor had said so, Jining could only nod and agree. However, for safety's sake, he still said, Your Majesty, why don't I personally go and see how the Marquis of Loyalty is preparing? Is there anything I can help with? That's good. Then you can go. Zhu Qiyu thought that sending Jining was a form of attaching importance to him, so he nodded and agreed. Following Sun Tong, Jining arrived at the courtyard where the mercenaries were stationed. When he saw Lang Song here, he merely nodded as a greeting. This was what the two of them had discussed before. In front of Yang Chendong, they would try their best to pretend that they were not familiar with each other to confuse him. How could he know that this was just Yang Chendong's idea? He wanted to give Jining hope and let him feel that he had a chance. This way, the mercenaries and himself would be safe and they would be able to reap more benefits. Marquis of Loyalty, is the army going to fight Walla? After entering the meeting room, Jining asked knowingly. That's right. It has already been arranged. We're just waiting for your Majesty's tiger tally. Yang Chendong nodded and directly asked for the tiger tally. He had no intention of explaining the battle plan to Jining. Chapter 206. It was one thing for Yang Chendong to not have eunuchs as supervisors when he led troops into battle, but he couldn't even be bothered to explain the battle plan. This made Jining's expression turn ugly. Duke of Loyalty, how are we going to deal with the Walla this time? Do you have a chance of winning? Jining kept asking for the battle plan. Although it was no longer a secret, Jining had the right to know. If he knew, it was the same as the emperor knowing. But Yang Chendong couldn't be bothered to waste words with him. He still remembered that before he returned, it was this man who had ordered the brocade guards to attack Xianxia village. Yang Chendong didn't settle the score with him because he cared about the big picture. But it didn't mean that he would still speak nicely with him. Thus, in front of Yang Guang, Sun Tong and the others, he turned around and said, "This marquis has spoken for an entire night, and my mouth is already dry. If Eunuch Jin wants to know the specific situation, you can ask someone else." Yang Guang, Sun Tong, and the others' expressions changed when they saw him reject Jining in front of everyone. This was the head eunuch of the ceremony directorate, the favorite of the emperor. Wasn't Yang Chendong afraid that Jining would hold a grudge against him and settle the score later? Tao Jin and the others couldn't help but lower their heads, indicating that they wanted to draw a clear line with Yang Chendong. Yang Guang stood unmoving. Sun Tong looked conflicted and hesitant. But in the end, he raised his head and looked at Jinying's deflated expression. Yang Chendong took in everyone's expressions out of the corner of his eye. Then, his gaze landed on Jining. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. His smile was playful. At this moment, Jining was furious. Ever since Zhu Qiyu had come to power, no one had dared to speak to him like this. Even the current emperor would talk to him in a negotiating tone when he encountered something. However, Yang Chendong actually dared to openly oppose him. This was simply challenging his authority. Jining was furious, but on the surface, she did not show any signs of anger. Instead, she laughed and said, "Fine. Since the emperor has handed over military power to the Marquis of Loyalty, there should not be any problems. In that case, this duke will congratulate the army in advance on their triumphant return. This is the tiger tally. This duke still has to go back and report to His Majesty, so I won't stay any longer. Farewell." After saying that, Jining turned around and left. No matter how one looked at it, her footsteps were somewhat unsteady. It was clear that she was extremely angry. But at the same time, he still had a backup plan in his heart, which was that he did not know the details of the battle plan. If they lost the battle, it would have nothing to do with him. At that time, he could use this as an excuse to punish Yang Chendong. What Jining didn't know was that Yang Chendong would give her this opportunity. Because of Yang Chendong's attitude towards Jining, the atmosphere in the meeting room was extremely tense. Yang Chendong acted as if he didn't see it and said, "All right, go do whatever you need to do. The tiger tally has already arrived. The army will set off in an hour." Yang Guang, Sun Tong, and the others quickly left. They needed to collect their weapons. It would take some time to gather their men. Lang Song and the others all stayed behind. Each of them only brought a company of soldiers, so they could be called to battle at any time. Without any outsiders, everyone's spirits were much more relaxed. Lang Song also carefully came to Yang Chendong's side and said, "Young master, Jining is quite angry with you, but I don't know why she did this. Didn't you say that the group of eunuchs could always influence the great Ming Emperor's thoughts?" This was not only Lang Song's confusion, but also everyone's confusion. Even Tiger's Mane, who had been by Yang Chendong's side all this time, had a puzzled expression. These days, the sixth young master had been polite to everyone. Why did he suddenly turn hostile tonight? Seeing everyone's confusion, Yang Qindong laughed loudly and said, "You don't have to worry about the young master's safety. With you all here, who would dare to touch this young master? As for tonight's actions, they were originally intentional. I wanted to show my dislike for Jining and let the world know that this young master doesn't like the group of eunuchs." "Why is that?" everyone asked again in confusion. "The people's hearts." Yang Qindong pondered for a moment and didn't answer immediately. Instead, he paused for a moment before spitting out these two words. Ever since the defeat of the Tumu fortress, everyone knew that the eunuchs had ruined the great Ming dynasty's plans. They had caused so many soldiers to die tragically on the battlefield, and so many officials to die without even leaving behind their corpses. This caused the common people and some officials to hate the eunuchs to the bone. Yang Qindong didn't give Jining any face and did it in front of so many people. Presumably, it wouldn't be long before this matter spread out. Even if these people didn't say anything, they would use the security bureau to spread the news. In this way, everyone would know that the loyal Marquis wasn't afraid of the eunuchs. This was tantamount to giving everyone a glimmer of hope. Letting those people who hated the eunuchs to the bone find a leader would allow him to win the hearts of the army and the people in a very short period of time. These might not be of much use in the political struggles of the upper echelons. But once it was time to explode, it would definitely be a force that couldn't be underestimated. Yang Qindong's goal was to replace the great Ming dynasty peacefully. The hearts of the army and the people were the most important issues to be resolved. As for the officials and eunuchs, as long as they were given enough benefits, they wouldn't be a problem. This was the true reason why Yang Qindong didn't give Jining any face. In the end, he was setting up a trap. It was just that he had set it up too early, so others couldn't see its effects. He only mentioned the people's hearts and didn't give any further explanation. Yang Qindong looked at Lang Song and the others and said, "This battle concerns the safety of the great Ming dynasty's capital and the image of this young master. Do you have the confidence to win this battle?" "Yes." Lang Song and the others stood at attention, their faces full of confidence as they replied. "Very good. Since that's the case, you can go and make your preparations. Lang Song, stay behind." Yang Qindong waved his hand at everyone. Xiao Feng, Tang Shan, Wu Shang, and the others quickly left to mobilize the people before the battle. Lang Song, who was left behind, looked at his young master expectantly. "Let's go. The two of us will leave the city first. There are some things that need to be arranged in advance." Looking at Lang Song, Yang Qindong smiled confidently. He wouldn't tell others that he had a large warehouse. He could take out many heavy weapons at any time. Thus, he left Lang Song alone to make arrangements for this matter. The old man had an impatient personality. Ever since he received the order from Yes Hen, he had been rushing toward the great Ming dynasty's capital without stopping. In just one day, he had arrived at Willow Town, which was 30 li away from the capital. "General, we've been hurrying along the way. Both men and horses are tired. Should we rest here for the night first? When the sun rises tomorrow morning, we'll go straight to the great Ming dynasty's capital." A trusted aide looked at the lit villages and towns in front of him and suggested. The grandfather shook his head and arrogantly said, "There's no need. Let's rest in the town first, and then we'll launch a night assault on the capital. We'll catch the enemy by surprise." "Ha ha ha, the merit will definitely go to this general." Since he had taken the role of the vanguard, he naturally had to make achievements. Otherwise, wouldn't he be ridiculed by others? As for the success rate of the night attack on the great Ming dynasty's capital, he didn't consider it at all. In the Battle of the Tumu Fortress, what he saw was the scene of the defeated army of the great Ming dynasty being killed and captured in groups. At this moment, he didn't put the strength of the great Ming dynasty's army in his eyes at all. In order to reach the great Ming dynasty's capital as soon as possible, the old man entered Willow Town as Yang Qindong expected. If it were other generals, in order to reduce unnecessary trouble, when they encountered an enemy town, they might be able to take a detour and not directly attack. But because of the Battle of Tumu Fortress, the Walla cavalry had long been arrogant. They didn't even put the elite army of the great Ming dynasty in their eyes, so how could they take the ordinary people of a town seriously? On the contrary, when they entered the town, they could burn, kill, and loot. How exciting and satisfying was that? However, when they really entered Willow Town, the situation was beyond their expectations. Although every house in the whole village was lit, they couldn't see a single person. When they broke in, they didn't find the existence of a living person, not even a chicken, duck, or goose. When the old man who received the report of the battle heard that this was an uninhabited town, he sneered and said, "I didn't expect the great Ming dynasty to play the scorched earth game with us. It's just that their calculations are wrong. We didn't consume too much on the way here. Even if we can't replenish for a while, it doesn't matter. Humph. It's just that this method is really annoying. Come, inform everyone to eat some dry food here. After half an hour, the army will set off." General Nai Gong didn't take the empty town in front of him seriously. This was a complete display of his arrogance. If it were any other general who was on guard, they would probably think carefully about why such a thing would happen. At least, they wouldn't rest so comfortably in this town. Of course, General Nai Gong was also a brave general who had led troops for many years. During the rest time, he didn't forget to send scouts to the front to inquire about information. But he didn't know that the scouts he sent out were destined to not return. They had completed their mission of going to the underworld to inquire about information. Nai Gong's army stopped in Willow Town and didn't leave. This gave Xiao Feng, Yang Jie, and Mao Fusho enough time to prepare. Seeing that the enemy had entered the encirclement, the 2,100 people quickly set up a defensive line on the west side of Willow Town. Each of them drew their bows and prepared to block the enemy's retreat. While Xiao Feng and the others were still preparing, at the east exit of Willow Town, Tang Shan had already begun his journey to harvest lives. Chapter 207. Xiao Feng, Tao Jin, Gao Li, and the other 2,100 soldiers were the first to enter the battlefield. With sufficient time, they even dug a simple trench for the soldiers to hide in. Just as they finished everything, the sky began to darken. Not long after, the sounds of people chattering could be heard in the distance. This was the sound of Walla's vanguard troops entering Willow Town. The enemy was right in front of them. In an instant, the 2,000 soldiers of the warden's office became very nervous. Some of the soldiers who were participating in a battle for the first time had their palms sweating profusely to express the anxiety in their hearts. This was how they should behave when they were on the battlefield for the first time. For some people, even if it was their second time on the battlefield, they would still be nervous. However, after 100 battles, they would no longer be nervous when they saw the battlefield. Instead, they would be excited. In contrast, the 100 soldiers led by Teng Shan were very calm. They first used sharp military shovels to dig a hole in the ground to ensure that they could hide their bodies well. Then they set up the 95 style in their hands and aimed the crosshairs at the only exit from Willow Town that led to the capital. None of the 100 or so people spoke, nor did they make any extra noise. They gave off the feeling of ghosts in the night. Other than a faint shadow, nothing else could be seen. The lifelessness of the Leng Feng soldiers shocked the surrounding 2,000 soldiers of the warden's office. Among them, there were some people who were quite skilled and thought that they were great. However, when they compared themselves, they realized that the gap between them and the soldiers was huge. Not long after the soldiers finished their preparations, 3 war horses rushed out of the town and headed straight for the formation they had set up. From the looks of it, they were all lightly dressed. There was no doubt that they were scouts. Position 1, Position 2, Position 3, get ready to fire. Positions 4, 5, 6, and 6, prepare to fire at any time. Seeing the 3 enemy scouts charging towards his formation, Tangshan Company commander, who was leading the formation, only took a glance before losing interest. There were only 3 people and they were not even enough to fill the gaps between the teeth. He could just hand them over to 3 soldiers. The 3 people who were named immediately became excited. This was a kind of glory, but at the same time it was also a kind of test. Didn't you see that Company Commander Tangshan had arranged for other people to take the last shot at any time? If he really missed, he would lose face and the limelight would be stolen by others. If that happened, he wouldn't even be able to find a place to cry. The 3 soldiers closed their right eyes and aimed at the 3 moving targets with their left eyes. Their breathing gradually stabilized, and their right index fingers gently placed on the trigger, preparing for shooting. Fight! When he estimated that the 3 enemy scouts were only 150 steps away from him, Tangshan softly spat out a word. Then, 3 gunshots were heard. Bang! 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 On the opposite side, 3 Walla scouts fell off their horses at the same time. F***CK. When the 3 of them fell off their horses, the warriors in positions 4, 5 and 6 cursed at the same time. This had nothing to do with quality. It was all because they didn't have the chance to shoot. It was just another kind of complaint. Looking at the warriors in positions 1, 2 and 3, they were all in high spirits. They almost laughed out loud when they saw that they had hit the target. At the same time, the soldiers of the Great Ming Dynasty who were with them all widened their eyes in disbelief at this moment. The scene just now deeply stimulated them. They couldn't believe that a battle could be fought like this. From a distance of 150 steps in the dark, they could still accurately hit the enemy. What kind of method was this? Thinking about how they could fight side by side with such an army, the officials of the 5 cities' warden's office began to feel confident. Originally, they thought that it would be very difficult or even impossible to stop the enemy's cavalry of 10,000 with only 2,000 soldiers. As for the 100 mercenaries, they didn't take them seriously at all. What could such a small number of people do? However, when the truth was in front of them, they knew that they were wrong, very wrong. They were afraid that the combat power of these 100 mercenaries would not be much worse than the 2,000 of them. The 3 gunshots sounded so ear-piercing in the quiet night. Walla's army in Willow Town quickly moved. The general in charge of the town immediately shouted to his trusted aide, "It seems to be the sound of firearms. Go and see what happened." Although he suspected that it was the sound of firearms, the arrogant general still didn't think that the Great Ming army would have the courage to come out of the city and fight with him. They had received intelligence that although many of the nearby Great Ming Dynasty guards were sending reinforcements to the capital, distant water couldn't quench the immediate thirst. There were only 10,000 soldiers in the capital, and most of them were second-rate soldiers. They were very easy to deal with. Such an army wouldn't have the courage to come out of the city and provoke him. However, thinking was one thing and reality was another. Not long after the general sent people to patrol the situation, another round of gunshots sounded. Then, in the small courtyard where he was resting, a trusted aide ran over with a nervous expression. "General, General, we found a large number of Great Ming army outside the town. They used firearms and strong bows to kill dozens of our warriors." The trusted aide fell in front of the general and said in a panic, "What? Great Ming army?" When he heard that there were Great Ming army here, Walla was stunned for a moment. Then he laughed heartily. Very good, very good. This general thought that he would only start a massacre when he entered the capital. I didn't expect that he would deliver himself to my doorstep so quickly. Very good. Pass down the order. Warriors, get on your horses and charge with this general. It was just firearms and strong bows. The general really didn't put them in his eyes. Not to mention that accuracy was not good in the dark of the night. Even if it was daytime, he had 10,000 cavalry. Why would he fear the Great Ming army? Whether it was firearms or strong bows, there was a limit to how far they could shoot. There was also a time difference when controlling them. With this, the Walla cavalry could charge forward. As long as they charged into the enemy's camp, it would be time for them to start a massacre and rampage on the battlefield. The general was very confident. Not only that, his Walla cavalry didn't take the Great Ming army in front of them seriously. Along the way, they had seen too many useless Great Ming soldiers. There was no one who could scare them. As expected of the elite cavalry, they quickly gathered together. However, because the road to the east of Willow Town was not wide, it was not suitable for a large number of cavalry to charge forward. Thus, the general personally picked 500 cavalry, and let them be the vanguard of the vanguard to charge forward. No matter how much damage they suffered, they had to charge to the enemy's formation and create enough time for the rear troops to charge forward. The 500 cavalry obeyed the order and left. Like a gust of wind, they charged out of Willow Town and headed straight for the Great Ming army camp. At this moment, Tang Shan and the soldiers of the 3rd Company were looking forward with bright eyes. They were ready to fire at any time. Beside them, the 2,000 Great Ming soldiers led by Tao Jin and Gao Li also pulled their bows and were ready to shoot at any time. After shooting down the first 3 Vol scouts, the enemy had launched another wave of attacks. More than 30 of them had been wiped out by the mercenaries from afar. Although the Ming army had released some arrows during this period of time, they all knew that it was just to scare people. None of the Wat's cavalry had been killed by the arrows. After being robbed twice in a row, Tao Jin and the others also wanted to perform well this time. Thus, they gave the order early on. As long as the enemy cavalry entered the range of the shooting range, they did not need to wait for orders and could shoot arrows to kill the enemy. In the dark night, they were waiting with a net. At this moment, the air was filled with a kind of solidification factor, causing everyone's breathing to become heavier. The originally cold night was filled with a warm atmosphere. Within their sight, they could hear the sound of horse hooves coming from afar. Because there were too many cavalry, the ground was trembling because of it, causing every soldier's face to be filled with a dignified aura. They're coming out. In the hope and expectation, a large number of strong horses rushed out of Willow Town. There were also bursts of shouts and shouts. Those were the Walla warriors riding their horses. They wanted to rush forward at the fastest speed and kill the great Ming army. Prepare to shoot. The moment they saw the cavalry rush out of the town, Tang Shan, who was leading the team, gave the order to the soldiers of the 3rd Company. The distance of 500 steps was far beyond the effective range of the Type 95, which was 600 to 800 meters. If he gave the order to shoot now, it would be difficult for the bullets to hurt the enemy. However, this did not prevent him from giving the order to shoot. As long as the soldiers felt that they could kill the enemy, they could deal with it themselves. Every soldier carried a basic magazine, 300 bullets, to ensure that when fighting the Walla cavalry, the enemy would not be able to break through the defense line because of the lack of ammunition. Commander Tang Shan gave the order, and the momentum of the 100 soldiers of the Cold Vanguard suddenly changed. A powerful murderous aura spread out from their bodies. In the end, it formed a substantial cold air, causing the great Ming soldiers who were closer to them to feel a burst of coldness. Ayo yo ho! The Walla cavalry made a charging sound that belonged to their race. Under the command of their masters, the strong horses quickly closed the distance between the two sides. 350 steps. 300 steps. 250 steps. They had already reached the effective range of the Type 95, but the soldiers of the 3rd Company did not shoot. It was obvious that their usual training was effective. Due to the lack of raw materials such as copper and iron in the arsenal of Crimson City, when the instructor taught the Cold Vanguard soldiers, the most common sentence was to save ammunition and try to shoot every bullet into the enemy's chest instead of shooting randomly. Chapter 208. Even though Lung Feng had brought enough ammo this time, he didn't want to waste any bullets. He gripped his gun tightly and stared ahead like an eagle, thinking about the best time to fire. 230 steps. 220 steps. 200 steps. When they reached 200 paces, which was the effective distance of 300 meters, the sound of gunfire suddenly became louder. In the dark night, it was as if a meteor shower had streaked across the sky, directly pouring down on the bodies of the Walla cavalry that was surging forward. Under the dazzling light of the fire, the Walla cavalry, who seemed to have seen hope, experienced what it meant to be in hell, and experienced what it meant to have nothing to live for, to have no hope in life. When the powerful bullets spun out of the barrel and drilled into their bodies in less than half a breath, many of the Walla cavalry were killed on their horses before they could even understand what was happening. Perhaps because the charging speed was too fast, many of the cavalrymen were already dead, but their bodies were still charging forward. Only after 2 or 3 breaths did they fall off their horses with a plop. Even when they died, they probably didn't understand what had killed them. The 100 Cold Vanguard soldiers followed what they had learned in their training, firing in a staggered formation. It was as if they had set up a net of fire, wiping out all of the Walla cavalry within the range of 200 to 150 steps. In short, other than the war horses, none of the Walla cavalry could get within 150 steps. This distance of 150 steps became an insurmountable barrier in front of the Walla cavalry. Behind the 100 Walla cavalry were Tao Jin and Gao Li's 2 soldiers from the 5 cities warden's office. Originally, they thought that this would be a tragic battle, and some of the soldiers were already prepared to die for a righteous cause. But when they saw the Walla cavalry's sudden burst of power and the situation stabilized, they knew that this was not a battle, but a massacre. That's right, a massacre. Not a single one of the cavalrymen was able to get within 150 paces. At such a distance, even if they wanted to shoot arrows, they wouldn't be able to reach the effective range and wouldn't be able to do any damage. The Walla cavalry's crossbows could not shoot over, and the 2,000 soldiers of the Great Ming dynasty could not shoot either. This scene caused Tao Jin and Gao Li's hearts to burn with anxiety. They were here to gain merit, not to be spectators. They wanted to kill the enemy, but the distance that a strong bow could shoot was limited. Even if they shot from such a long distance, they would still lose their accuracy. There was no difference between shooting and not shooting. Commanders, if you really don't have anything else to do, just bring some people to bring back Warale's healthy horses. These are all good things. Whether it's offered to the imperial court or sold to merchants, they are all military merits and silver. Tang Shan noticed the anxious mood of the two great Ming dynasty commanders behind him, so he gave them a suggestion. The strong horses were in front. Without their owners, more and more of them gathered and began to hinder the Walla cavalry's shooting targets. If these strong horses could be moved away, it could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. Tao Jin and Gao Li, who were originally worried that they had nothing to do, immediately smiled. Okay, we will immediately organize people to steal the horses. Oh no. It's to pick up the horses, hee. Since there was military merit and money to be obtained, and there was not much danger to their lives, why wouldn't they do such a good thing? At this moment, under the command of the two commanders, groups of great Ming soldiers rushed forward under the moonlight and brought the tall and strong horses back to their camp. They also cleared the obstacles in front of the Walla cavalry to ensure that they could have a clear line of sight. At the same time, there were no obstacles after the bullets were shot, so they could better kill the Walla cavalry. In Willow Town, 1,000 Walla cavalry were sent out, but not a single one returned. Another 1,000 Walla cavalry rushed out, but only less than 200 people escaped. The results that were sent back made General Nai Gong turn pale with fright. He couldn't understand when the firearms of the great Ming dynasty became so powerful that they could also play a role in sealing off the night. It was not that they had never dealt with the firearms of the great Ming dynasty before. In the past, when Zhu Di was still alive, he took them to the grasslands to commit crimes. In the beginning, they were indeed intimidated by the firearms that could emit smoke and shoot iron bullets. But after many bloody battles, they also found out the shortcomings of the firearms. That was, they could only shoot one shot at a time. After that, it would take a long time to reload. When it was used again, the accuracy was extremely poor. It was far better to use a strong bow. Over time, such things no longer scared the Walla people. Only they dared to risk their lives and sacrifice themselves. They could break through the firearms of the great Ming dynasty by paying a small price. After that, they could do whatever they wanted. How could it be like this time? 2 echelons of 2,000 people rushed out, but only 1/10 of them returned. What the hell is going on? Who can give me an explanation? Seeing that they had lost nearly 1/5 of their forces without killing a single enemy, General Nai Gong angrily roared at his subordinates. All the Walla generals lowered their originally arrogant heads deeply. They also couldn't figure out what was going on. They couldn't understand why the great Ming army, which was originally weak, became so powerful that they suffered such a big loss. No one answered his question. General Nai Gong's emotions couldn't be vented. He was even angrier. Just as he was about to use the saddle to teach these disappointing subordinates a lesson, suddenly, a burst of gunshots came from the west side of Willow Town. It was like many firecrackers were set off. What's going on? The sudden sound scared General Nai Gong. He looked at the burst of fire coming from the west side of the town and asked angrily. Just as the words left his mouth, a young general quickly ran in front of General Nai Gong and knelt on the ground. General, a large number of great Ming soldiers suddenly rushed in behind us. We were careless for a moment and more than 500 people were killed or injured. This was a Walla Chili Arch who was in charge of covering the rear. Usually, his task was the simplest and safest. He was only responsible for checking if there were any soldiers who escaped because of the battle. But today, they were suddenly attacked. They were completely unprepared and were caught off guard. Half of the soldiers died on the spot. The rest reacted faster and escaped into the town. General Nai Gong was in a fit of anger. When he heard the Kiliarka's words, he stretched out his right hand and grabbed the Kiliarka's collar and pulled it in front of his face. What did you say? The great Ming army attacked us from behind? How many people are there? I can't see clearly. It's too dark. The Chiliarch shook his head with an innocent expression. He couldn't be blamed for answering like this. It was really too dark. In addition, he was unprepared. When the gunshots rang out, a large number of his brothers fell to the ground. He only cared about running for his life. How could he have the time to see how many enemies were there? The Kiliarch's answer made General Nai Gong throw him to the ground angrily.
Then, he shouted to the other troops. Who dares to lead the troops to the back and see what happened?
General Nai Gong in Willowtown was stunned. He originally thought that he was the one who took the initiative to attack. But reality told him that the great Ming army was prepared. Now that he was the one who was attacked, how could he not be angry? Among the young generals, there was a brave Chiliarch who took the initiative to lead his troops to the west side of Willowtown. But when cold weapons faced the 9.5 spear that had a shooting range of nearly 400 steps, the result was obvious. After leaving behind a few hundred corpses, the slow ones all retreated. At this point, an unbelievable result was placed in front of everyone. General Nai Gong's troops were surrounded in Willowtown, which was not very big. East side of town. Ting Shan looked at the gunshots and flames coming from the west side of town. He was furious. Xiao Feng, King bastard. It was no wonder that Tang Shan was so angry.
According to the previous plan, only when they were facing the crazy attacks of the Walla cavalry would they send out a red signal to the sky.
At that time, Xiao Feng's first company would poke the Walla cavalry from the back to distract them. At the same time, they would also reduce the pressure on their side. But now, Xiao Feng did not even wait for his signal. He directly poked the Walla vanguard from the back. How could Tang Shan not be angry? He was not satisfied with the fight yet. But the reality was already like this. Even if he was angry, there was nothing he could do. Ting Shan could only look at the east side of Willowtown, hoping that there would be more Walla cavalry who were not afraid of death. Maybe it was because the heavens knew the hope in his heart. A large number of cavalry rushed out from the east side of town, and there were still many of them. Using the shadows under the moonlight, a rough calculation showed that there were at least more Walla cavalry than the last time. Haha, very good. This grandfather is to my liking. He knows what the battalion commander likes and wants to die. Brothers of the 3rd Company, listen up. Check your guns and ammo. Make preparations before shooting. Seeing that the enemy did not show any intention of retreating because of Xiao Feng's actions, Tang Shan changed his frowning expression and laughed out loud. The 3rd Company's cold vanguard members were originally angry because Xiao Feng's 1st Company didn't keep their promise. However, when they suddenly saw that the enemy still charged out, all of their faces lit up with joy. They quickly checked the 95 shots and replaced it with a new magazine. Why did the Walla army still rush out when they knew that the Ming army was blocking them from the east side? This had a lot to do with their commander, General Nai Gong. Knowing that they were surrounded, General Nai Gong was not afraid. He knew that the Ming army only had about 10,000 people. He originally thought that they were waiting for him at the east side. If he wanted to rush over, it would be difficult. But the Ming army actually took the initiative to split into two. Wasn't this the same as splitting their limited forces? Even so, how many enemies could there be in the front? If he did not rush now, when would he? When he broke through the front line, wouldn't the capital of the great Ming dynasty be an undefended empty city? Wouldn't he be able to take it? You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.